anyway. That's all I can say.
Andrew, the mind boggles. It really does. It was one of those games watching it where I genuinely was like, I hate missing Swindon games. I really, really do. Birkenhead for me, in my current personal situation, was a stretch just a little bit too far on a windy weekday evening. But yeah, I mean, my hats off to you, Andrew. You are the length and breadth of this country. Appreciate it's professional for you, but it's also a labour of love, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's a great privilege to do. I know that sounds terribly corny, but at the point where I stopped kind of walking into the ground and picking up my pass and not feeling cheerful about it is the point where I should stop immediately. And somehow, despite last night and despite some thrilling football in some not so thrilling eras recently, that hasn't happened yet. So long may that feeling continue.
Well, good on you. Do you know what? I mean, I've been very privileged, Andrew, over the years to be invited on by the BBC to summarise on a few occasions. I mentioned a couple of names there. Unfortunately, I was a little bit. Vic won't thank me for saying this, but Vic was a little bit before my sort of adult years where I would have been trusted with a mic in my hand. But I have worked prior with both Chris Wise and with Ed Hadwin. And it really is something to behold when you see the amount of preparation that goes into what you do, the amount of travel, potential technical hiccups, the multitasking that you do in terms of things that are going on in your ears whilst you're also trying to make sense of what's going on in front of you is no mean feat. So I mean, hopefully over the course of tonight we'll get into the bones of some of that, how you survive it, and how, as you say, you're still thrilled to be picking up your match pass. But whilst we're waiting to be joined by my illustrious co-host Tyler, I just thought we might as well start by having a little tuck into last night. But I thought before we do that, what are your thoughts on the season thus far, Andrew? Speaking as both a commentator and a Swindon Town fan, where's your mind at?
I suppose the first thing is it's massive relief that it's not what we all feared it was probably going to be about July, and that we're not sort of sitting there in 19th, or God forbid even lower, that we're not in Oldham's position and doing that. So that's the first thing. I think it's very hard to get away from the current kind of prevailing feeling that it's all just sort of unravelling a bit at the moment. It's a real, test of how pragmatic Ben Garner's going to be. He's broadly stick to his principles, but will they do what Richie Wellens would do sometimes and tweak them a bit? If you remember that Crew game a couple of seasons ago where he just kind of tore everything up and threw a new formation in the air and just felt that he had to do something different to beat Crew, and he did. So will Ben Garner do that? I don't know, but it's been much better than I expected, but of course, we all get a bit greedy, don't we? Once we've got past the first bit, we know we're staying in the division. Then you're suddenly looking up. So, but no, most of the time it's been much better. I thought I was often going to be coming out of Sutton and goodness knows wherever with a polite grin on my face, and it's like, okay, this is where we are, and this is where we're going to be for a couple of years. But it's kind of better than that. But everyone's just a bit on edge at the moment, and last night doesn't help.
Yeah, I mean, certainly from my point of view, sort of speaking from my not so lofty perch in the town end, I've been to a few away games this year, pretty much all the home games, and I think what really has occurred to me is that the lads have given us enough highlights to sort of stave off any sense of immediate panic and any sense of doom and gloom. I mean, the fact that the crowds keep coming back show that there is more than a hint of optimism. Appreciate that. A couple of the recent crowds have been a little bit below what the club were maybe expecting. But having said that, they're still up massively on where we were during the tail end of John Sheridan's reign. I think the biggest issue, I think, from my perspective is just, I mean, we've talked on the show recently about comparing eras and comparing levels of engagement from the playing staff and from the management versus, for example, the Richie Wellens era, and have highlighted that potentially, look, there could be more done there to sort of help his own cause and curry a little favour. It's not lost on me that we were singing Richie Wellens' name loudly and proudly when we were in a kind of comparable league position under his reign. And and Ben Garner hasn't enjoyed the same level of affection shown towards him. I think the other thing that makes his job very tricky is obviously it's kind of glib to throw around the news of the and talk of the embargo and nearly losing our club in the summer, but I think being realistic, the club are operating to a certain budget. The club are obviously restricted to a certain degree. The loss of a player like Anthony Grant, whilst on one hand is going to be a huge help to Ben Garner in terms of freeing up funds to operate in the transfer market, I don't think you can understate the level of enthusiasm, passion and affection that the fans held for Anthony Grant. And as I've looked through the current team, and if I'm going to do a like-for-like comparison with the Richie Wellens era, for me it's shy of talisman. You look through the Richie Wellens lineup, and there was a core of players that you would call talismanic, that had a real bond and a certain amount of sort of immediate affection shown to them from the crowd. And I think Anthony Grant was one of the few players in the current squad that carries that level of affection. And clearly losing him, along with losing other talismen that sadly were all loan players, so not our assets, I think makes it a very, very, very tough task for him. And clearly now we're trying to bed in players that weren't necessarily first choices at their respective teams. So they're going to be a little bit shy on fitness. They're not used to how we play. It is going to take a while at a time where those around us are hitting their stride. So, I mean, I think that kind of, from my point of view, Andrew, sort of pretty much dovetails with what you're saying. But I mean, last night was certainly the lowest point of the season. Would you not agree? I mean, it was pretty poor fare.
Yeah, no. I think that has to be the worst performance, kind of collectively, I can think of. And as another thing that the recruiting has very consciously been, it has sort of largely been kind of younger players, even those younger players that you were sort of talking about with the kind of cult status who've. Terry Simpson has really been stuffed by Ipswich, frankly. And, Kane Kessler-Hayden, you look at that, I'm pretty sure if I was going to add them up, I'd have to check Tom Davis' age, but I'm pretty confident that between them, the two Tranmere centre-halves were older than the three Swindon centre-halves, which tells you a lot. And you perhaps do, you think back to that Richie Wellens squad, as you point out, there's loads of experienced players in there. You think Michael Doughty played a little bit in the Premier League, but certainly around at a higher level. People like Danny Rose, who could come in, who had experience of promotions before, and with the kind of recruitment they've gone for, partly necessarily, they haven't got that. So maybe when things are going wrong and it needs someone to grab it a little bit, there are perhaps those players with quite that kind of experience and knowledge to do so.
Yeah, and I think knowledge and experience. I think experience feeds in with one of the real bugbears that fans are sharing at the moment, which is the sort of regular stream of ill discipline that we see across the squad, and unfortunately in the dugout as well. Obviously, Scott Marshall being sent off, last night certainly raised an eyebrow, as he came across as being one of the more sort of level-headed and experienced members of the coaching staff. And I think it's interesting when you're recruiting very talented young players. I don't like to say that all young players are instinctively hot-headed. That would be unfair. But it is fair to say there are a lot of young players. If you take Louis Reed, for example, after he was sent off, I mean, he came straight out, didn't he, and said, essentially in as many words, I'm a young player. It was a big mistake. I shouldn't have done it. I learned from my mistakes. You and I know it's probably unlikely he'll do something like that ever again in his career. Chances are, unfortunately, that young players are prone to those kind of outbursts, and it is purely an experience thing that prevents them from doing it. And if it's not their own experience, then it's the experience of those around them. And obviously, most of our squad don't carry that level of experience, unfortunately. I think the other thing as well is that, I mean, I tweeted about it earlier today. Fundamentally, the very exciting team that we had pre-Christmas has pretty much had its guts ripped out of it. A combination of the lone players returning, injuries to Jack Payne, suspensions to both Dion Conroy, and a loss of form. Suspensions, of course, with Louis Reed. We're kind of the current team versus what we had pre-Christmas. It almost feels like we're comparing apples with pears. Would you not agree?
Yeah, no. I think they clearly are losses. Kessler Hayden obviously provided that sort of pace and dynamism and it kind of looks a bit like Joe Tomlin's sort of there to see if he can bring that to at least one of the wing-back positions if Rob Hunt's more steady. Davison is clearly struggling with fitness and hasn't been able to have the impact that Tyrese Simpson has had. That's for sure. So, the people who are giving Tyrese a few pelters earlier in the season are probably reflecting that wasn't the wisest analysis, I would think. But yeah, no, especially with sort of Payne and Reed out, albeit on a temporary basis, that really has kind of hit the squad a bit, and it did kind of show last night. It was just all a bit too much against experienced team with plenty of gnarly players who knew absolutely perfectly how to press Swindon and how to close Swindon down and get the defenders trying to play out in places they couldn't play out or they didn't want to play out.
Yeah, I mean, they were very well drilled, Tranmere, for my money. I think their pressing was relentless. Clearly, very, very fit side, very, very good at what they do. It's reflected in their league position. Before the game, it was wishful thinking, really. I was sort of trying to convince myself we could come away with 3 points. But I mean, in reality, it was always going to be a mountain to climb last night. And I mean, I'm trying to avoid all the football cliches, but unfortunately, they all really do apply.
Oh, I can do some of those, no worries.
Ah, well, I'll leave that to you. That could be your gig this evening, Andrew. So, I mean, from your going back to the season itself, Andrew, and coming at it from your sort of professional perch up on the commentary gantry, who immediately springs to mind as your kind of heroes and your villains thus far this season, both not necessarily looking internally at Swindon Town, but taking a broad view across the piece? Is that because I can think of a couple of immediate pieces of commentary where you were ducking projectiles and all kinds of things and still managing to put a little bit of mirth into your tone, but what used to be your heroes and villains of 2021-22 thus far?
Oh crikey, yeah, there was that Stevenage game where someone was like hurling a cup at us right at the end. I can't quite remember why they were sorry. Oh no, I know. I think some Swindon fans have got a box in behind us. So I think for once I wasn't the target of ire. I think I was. But we did have to duck pretty sharpish. Oh, heroes. That's a good question. I kind of feel like Louis Reed's come in and we do seem to enjoy a defensive midfielder, be it Anthony Grant or Louis Reed. He's really kind of come in and added something. Harry McCurdy's got great sort of cult status, and I have to admit, they seem to manage to steer us away from interviewing for him for a long time. But when I did speak to him, I was slightly worried that I was going to get kind of hunted to death, frankly. But actually, he was kind of really good and gave quite a kind of thoughtful and an interesting interview, I thought. So I have to say, when I kind of saw Weymouth at McCurdy at Weymouth and kind of remembered him from the Carlisle game a couple of seasons ago, I was kind of hopeful they might sign him as a player who could do something at this level. But I think he's kind of exceeded all our expectations, really. And with your keeper's hat on, Joe Wallacott, I think's really come on. So they're certainly kind of the on pitchers. I hope this doesn't sound too much like terrible. What can I say? Fluffing up for people I have to interview, but I think I give Rob Angus an enormous amount of credit for coming in as chief exec from the outside and taking a real risk by going where his heart was and taking charge of Swindon and trying to put it all together. And from what I can see, and whenever I speak to him, doing a really kind of professional and thorough job at it. And there is plenty, I think, as far as I can tell, that are sort of they've you put sort of one finger in the dike and I think something else comes out quite often. So I think Rob has impressed me a great deal with the way he's approached things and kind of what he's been able to do so far.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, actually. I mean, just sort of like addressing me to your heroes thus far then. I mean, I think I've been very vocal on this show pretty much since the first episode, really, where in terms of discussing Louis Reed. I think one of the reasons for that is that Louis makes himself so readily available in and around the stadium, whether that be in hospitality or down the side of the Arkles or in the car park. And I think I had some really interesting, I'm sure Phil won't mind me sharing with you, I had a really interesting exchange with Louis' dad a couple of weeks ago. I've got children of my own, but we also foster in our family as well, and we foster long term. So it's probably the closest that you will get to going down an adoption route without actually going down the full adoption route. And it can be a very, very delicate balance, fostering, for anyone that hasn't done it, because you are still maintaining contact with with birth family. You're maintaining contact with a local authority. It can be a very, very delicate balance in terms of the young person's emotions you're looking after. And the thing that really strikes me, I'll mention two names to you. So I lean on football quite heavily to kind of show our young people like a different way of life. Typically young people that we work with are from inner London. They're very channeled in their view, very blinkered. They wouldn't know one end of the M4 to the other. So you can imagine their surprise when they're now the dad in their life essentially wished them off down the M4 and exposes them to the wonderful world of Swindon town. And
yeah, definitely culture shock.
Yeah, it's absolutely quite a culture shock, geographically, emotionally, even down to people's accents. Sometimes these young people haven't heard an accent outside of inner London. So anyway, it's quite a journey. But the first time I brought my youngest to the county ground, we hung around for a few photos. I said, look, I'll take you down, introduce you to the players and such like. And Louis Reed spent a good portion of the time. Now, he didn't understand my background, doesn't know who I am, doesn't know who my daughters are. And we stood there talking, and Lou was really, really ebullient, very genuine, very passionate, and actually at no point did he give the impression he was looking to sort of dash away to his car. If anything, we were walking away from Louis at the end. Now, it could have been because he was hiding from certain persons that stalk the Arkles alleyway, but I didn't get that impression at all. And I shared that story and my background with his dad. And it's quite clear that Ghana's mantra of bringing good quality people into the playing staff, people that really respect their position as a professional footballer and how they feel about the club and how they feel about the community that they're serving, it certainly goes beyond the sort of run-of-the-mill footballer. And whilst I'm on the subject, sort of along similar lines, I tip my hat to our former loanee Tyree Simpson as well. Almost identical circumstances. Tyrese always has time for myself and my family, always happy to post for pictures, always happy to stand around and have a chat. So just picking up on what you were saying about Louis Reed certainly being a star on the pitch, certainly off it he reflects all the values that we see on it. And I think it's also interesting what you're saying about McCurdy. So just through various bits and bobs that I've done in and around the club, I've had some time where I've rubbed shoulders with Harry. And like you, I wasn't quite sure what to expect. It's like this guy's either going to go off like a firecracker or he's going to be meek as a mouse. And I just found him so very normal. Despite the fact he was walking around in orange slip-ons and socks, he was so quite the personality. But at the same time, just again, I use that word ebullient, just a really sort of chatty, humble, sort of nicely presented young guy. He seems to be very, very happy. I mean, he actually said to me he's hoping to get some roots down in the area and settle at Swindon and really kick on in his career. And that was just prior to him going on his run of goals. So yeah, I certainly from a fan's perspective, I would be flagging those guys as my heroes. But I don't necessarily want to press you on your villains. But has there been any? I mean, we mentioned Stevenage. Has there been any sort of incidents or persons that have sort of taken the wind out your sails this year, maybe unexpectedly or expectedly?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm trying to think actually. I mean, like I say, generally with the kind of players, some occasionally in the past you can have ones where it's like, oh, they're X's coming out. It's like, oh, okay, this is going to be like getting blood from a stone, or whatever. But most of them are pretty kind of good like that. I think whoever it was at Trammy who told me I looked like I was carrying so much stuff I looked like I'd been thrown out by my wife when I arrived was possibly might go down into the villain category, although it was delivered with the usual scouse bonhomie. So I guess I'll let them get away with that. But no, I think it's hard. I think I'm probably fairly forgiving, really. So and genuinely not trying to dodge the question, but it's hard to think of anyone certainly in like the Swindon squad that you'd really kind of roll your eyes at. So yeah, I guess the odd paper cup hurler at Stevenage and Scouse Wit would fall into those categories.
That'll do me nicely. So we're delighted to say that Tyler's joined us, Andrew, whilst we've been nattering away. He's been feeling a little bit rough today, so both of us will excuse him if he's a little off form today. But how are you, Tyler? Good evening and welcome to you.
Yeah, I'm all right, mate. How are you?
Yeah, well, listen, I've got no sympathy for you. The only reason you're feeling rough is that obviously you made the trip to Birkenhead last night. All credit to you.
No, don't remind me. Didn't happen.
Listen, we've just done whilst we're waiting for you to come on, we've just done a minor dissection. We'll come back to you, and I will come back to Tranmere in a little bit more detail later. But we're Andrew, from my point of view, what I wanted to do was sort of move things on and have a little chat about you and your background and so forth. I was delighted to find out, despite the fact you don't look it, you've actually got a fair bit on me, mate. So 48 years old, Andrew, is that correct?
Your researchers are good. They're all too good. Yeah. So 48. So I've been around hopefully longer than it sounds.
The only reason I flagged that, Andrew, is Tyler takes great pleasure in calling me granddad. So I'm quite pleased. I'm quite pleased I'm not the oldest person on the show tonight. So, but it means that I've got to treat you with the reverence that an elder statesman is due.
So am I a near-death experience at this point? Am I?
Not in the slightest. You've got more energy than the both of us put together, Andrew. I assure you. Andrew, as I understand it, will you talk to me a little bit about your family geography? Were you born in Swindon?
My kind of family are from Swindon. It's like my parents sort of grew up there. They met there, but once they got into their 20s, they kind of moved around. So weirdly, I'm born in Liverpool, but with the parents and everything, it's very much sort of Swindon. But I was kind of brought up round kind of Surrey, because my dad kind of ended up working for the in the sort of civil service. So he kind of commute into London, disappear into the Department of Education, and so I haven't necessarily got the twang, but I do have the kind of sort of Swindon background where all the family are from.
So you and I are very similar in that respect, because I'm a South East Londoner born and bred, and my immediate family are actually all either Londoners or Irish, and I have a lot of family that still live in Swindon. I have family living in Covingham, I've got family in Walcott, I've got family in Stratton, Toot Hill, Freshbrook, etc. So the kind of, I'm wondering whether the common denominator you said about your family, were one or t'other of them town fans? Were they the ones that got you into the supporting the football club?
Yeah, well, my dad was very much into football, and there was actually a point, because he was a sort of teenager just after the Second World War, and he was kind of on the books for a little bit as a goalkeeper. And the story, as far as I know, and there is at least sort of photographic evidence to prove he did do this, and he's not just done it to wind me up. So there's like Paul Plowman documentary photos that he possibly had the chance to go professional, or he had the chance to go to university, and immediately after the war, the chance to go to university from his point of view, I think, was too good to turn down, compared to the possibility of being a apprentice goalkeeper on Swindon's book. So he went there. So obviously, the football connection there and the kind of Swindon connection is very strong, and he'd sort of go and see them when he was a sort of student, and when he could, and that kind of thing. So he was sort of in London, so if they were sort of playing in London, he'd go and watch them. He'd go and watch them wherever. So he didn't go so much when the older he got, but it's always sort of there in the background. Swindon is the team.
Yeah. So do you still remember your first game, Andrew?
I do. I had to look it up on the brilliant Swindon-Town-FC website, just to check that my memory of it was actually right. But I was taken to a game when I must have been 5, which I checked. All I could remember was that Swindon were beaten 4-3 at home by Fulham. So I did look it up, and there is a game at about the right time. So I don't think I dreamt it was fun. I can't remember anything about it really, other than going into what's the sort of main stand now, the John Trollope stand, and at that age, you're just kind of being overwhelmed by the size of it and the greenness of the grass and all all those kind of cliches. And there was some kid with a Fulham scarf sitting right in front of me, and I don't know why that was, because he clearly should have been in the away end. But in terms of kind of the players or the game, or very much, I can't remember a thing about it other than that result. So that's the first game. I think appropriately enough, it looks like it was that sort of David Peach era where we spent a load of money signing players that looked quite decent on paper, and it didn't turn out like that. It all went a bit off.
Well, you and I have got a little bit further shared common interest there, because my first game was also against Fulham. I remember it very well. 86-87 season, 1-0 win away at Craven Cottage, and Dave Bamber scoring the winner in an era where I don't necessarily think we were throwing money around, but Lou Macari made some very, very astute signings, and then obviously clearly laid the foundations for what became our golden era through to the kind of mid-90s. But all stuff. So again, common ground, Andrew. We've got loads in common. a bit of Fulham. Tyler, do you remember your first game?
I'll tell you what,
you're a wee pup, mate. Now come on, I know you're feeling rough, but it must have felt like yesterday to you.
I'll jump on the Footballogy and find out for you.
Oh, that's shocking. Right, we're going to have to come back to you if it doesn't spring straight to the front of your mind. That's ridiculous. 17 years old, Andrew. Can you believe it? I still can't remember his first ever game. And this is a guy that knows more about Swindon Town than I care to mention.
Tell you what, if this is right, it's pretty good going, because it seems it would have been when we beat Pompey 5-0 at the county ground.
What a way to start. Got no wonder you're a die-hard supporter. I wish I could have had that for mind you, 1-0 win, FA Cup third round against higher league opposition. Yeah, that sucked me in for life, didn't it? But Andrew, did you say you remember the result from your first game?
Well, like I said, Swindon lost 4-3 at home, but that was like the one thing I could remember about it. I could remember like seeing the grass, thinking whoa, and just being blown away by the whole thing and the result, and like exactly how they got there or what happened in between is a total blur. I can't tell you anything about it.
Yeah, well, to be fair, like as a 5-year-old, even on the raw end of a defeat, you've walked away seeing 7 goals. So I can imagine, even if it wasn't the town that sucked you in, the concept of going and watching a cracking game of football would have certainly sucked you in. Could have been worse, couldn't it? Your first game could have been last night. You'd never have come back.
Good God.
Do you? Who were your player heroes, Andrew? As you were, as you were sort of, as you remember your love for Swindon starting to unfold. Who are the players that really floated your boat?
Yeah, I think I shall be completely honest. I will come out here. Swindon was the team. I did have a teenage flirtation with Nottingham Forest a bit, I must admit, when they were in their Brian Clough heyday. So I can remember some of that team. And then for whatever reason, I'm not quite sure why, but I kind of re-engaged more with Swindon in the it was kind of more the kind of 90s. I'm probably a bit of a football Aravis just after Italia 90. I kind of got re-stimulated a bit again. So I kind of went, there was a fairly long gap, and then I went to a game at, where was it? I think it was Charlton away, but I think that was when they were playing at Upton Park. And it was just sort of watching Glenn Hoddle as sweeper, just pinging the ball majestically around, and Kerslake and Bowden putting it, kind of controlling it after that. And then it was kind of like, even though they lost on the day, I think Carl Leeburn scored. See, these are the random things that you remember, yeah.
So obviously, Andrew, I literally live in Charlton, Crystal Palace, Central, and Carl Leeburn has legendary status in the hood, as the kids like to say. Really interesting player. He was more of a cult hero because fundamentally he wasn't very good.
Yeah, no, he didn't score a lot, did he? But as is the way, you get Michael Ricketts or Carl Leeburn against us, and bang, they're on target. They're on target. So I kind of sort of picked it much more back up, I think, of that kind of era just after the demotion, all that, and pushing for the Premier League, and started going a bit more often when I was a kind of student and stuff. So obviously the kind of Hoddle, Calderwood, Taylor, Kerslake, should have gone through all the defenders there. So that era is kind of very strong. I guess Fjortoft is my kind of ultimate hero, really, because he went from, partly because the story is brilliant, partly because he was just funny and entertaining, and outgoing, and has got a really good media career now, which is no surprise. And he still kind of evidently cares about Swindon when you look at his Twitter. So I think Fjortoft's possibly my kind of all-time favourite, really. I was always kind of very fond of Peter Thorne when he wasn't injured as well. So
Peter Thorne's a wonderful player.
Yeah, so I think probably the time where I'm going sort of home and away just as a fan most often is that kind of mid sort of, Steve Finney, rest his soul kind of moment. And, I watched a lot of that team, and Ian Culverhouse always seemed to play with, he could have been smoking a cigar at the time. So I had a lot of kind of regard for Ian Culverhouse just because he made, third tier defending look absolutely effortless, really. So that kind of team, if less so the manager, I remember with kind of a lot of affection, really. So those are the kind of peak times, I think, when I was just kind of, I was sort of going home and away and so on.
Well, I'll tell you what's really interesting. So listening to those heroes, I completely agree with you. The sad thing about Ian Culverhouse that I used to say was that I wish Ian Culverhouse had been around just a season or so earlier.
Yeah, absolutely.
As opposed to Terry Fenwick. Because I certainly think he would have gone some way to filling the impossible void left by Glenn Hoddle. What really, this will make you chuckle though, Andrew. So Tyler's, as a consequence of getting to know Tyler over the last sort of year or so, I've ended up meeting a whole host of new people at Swindon Town and formed some really good friendships. And this week on our WhatsApp group, we were bounding around, the typical Dream 11s. And I was really sort of conspicuous by my absence, because the guys' 11s, as I was looking through them, I was literally almost from goalkeeper through to substitutes going, that guy doesn't hold a candle to Fraser Bigley. that guy doesn't hold a candle to David Kerslake. That guy doesn't hold a candle to Paul Bowden. And I've literally named the 90 before I could even get to 93. I'd named the 89-90 Swindon team, the Wembley final side, from top to bottom. And part of what makes me feel quite sad is that there is this whole generation of guys that I've met, and I mean, they're not, quite a few of the guys are a fair bit older than Ty, but still, they can't comprehend just how majestic, for example, Glenn Hoddle looked in a Swindon Town shirt at the county ground. Like the comprehension of, for Tyler's generation of football fan to explain to someone, imagine bringing David Beckham into Swindon Town and having him play at sweeper and hitting those Beckham rakish long diags, and it being so effortless, but also having, Beckham's a bad example because his profile is stratospheric compared to anybody, but, a player that certainly in footballing terms had that level of profile coming to Swindon and essentially carrying us to the Premier League at the ripe old age of, 30, 34, 35, 36. I mean, it's kind of beyond comprehension, I think, for a lot of the new generation of Swindon fans. And it's interesting, Andrew, because we talked about I think it was the show prior to the last one about our Swindon Town fans spoiled. And somebody made that exact point that, well, hang on a second, how can I be spoiled when, the best that I've ever known has been Owen Doyle and Jerry Yates? And because I come at it from a point of view of having seen the Macari, Ardiles, Hoddle era, even to an extent the first half of the Steve McMahon era, and then obviously thereafter the downs and the ups again. But it's it saddens me that, but at the same time, I feel quite smug that I actually got to see that level of greatness at the county ground, because it really was something to see, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yes, I mean, it's very difficult to easily sort of pinpoint the sheer kind of majesticness with which Glenn Hoddle would kind of do things and orchestrate the whole things. And it was kind of crushing when he went, because you lost your best player and you lost your manager at the same time, and that was kind of recoverable from. And Adrian Whitbread was going to do the same thing, much for all the effort he put in. But yeah, I think I do kind of realise on reflection, because you kind of sort of hit it a little bit before the peak, that normality, that was all a bit of anomaly, really. But the kind of worrying thing now is the normality is increasingly bouncing between the bottom two divisions, whereas historically we've generally sort of bounced between what's now the Championship and League One. I mean, that sort of League One season we're talking about, where it's when they've gone down and then gone down again. I think we all kind of strutted round after about 7 or 8 games, going to York or wherever it was in the third tier, and thinking. Certainly, I remember going to Brentford, thinking of Steve Finney again, and they were that terrace there was absolutely packed. Noise was tremendous. There was like real surge when he scored. Thinking, we're too good a club to be knocking around in the third tier. We're gonna drag ourselves back into our sort of into what should be our natural environment now in the Championship. And Swindon, a natural environment in the Championship, sadly, are not current bedfellows.
Yeah, I mean, I just sort of echo what I said earlier. I mean, that for me was a staple diet. Upper echelons of the Championship, pushing for the playoffs. I mean, I do vividly remember being in Swindon, ironically, and listening to BBC Radio Wiltshire when Sean Hodgetts broke the news, and it was almost like a side story that the overdraft had been called in by the bank, and at that age, I didn't quite understand the ramifications of that. The finances were going to be a lot tighter for the football club moving forward, that the club was going to have to cut its cloth and not be able to speculate perhaps in the way that it had in the past. And certainly, yeah, when I think back now, I mean, it's sad that story is one that sticks in my head, but from that point in time, obviously money talks. Football and money became more and more sort of wedded, and the ability for clubs like Swindon to, without that significant input from the bank, to continue to punch above our weight, we and along the lines, various crises and spells of mismanagement and spells of just poor managerial appointments have kind of done for us. But obviously, whilst it's hard to say off the back of last night, bright new eras and all that, and the future looks a little bit brighter. But you're getting back to you, Andrew. You're obviously now the man with the mic. So talk to me about when did you know that you wanted to get that mic in your hand and be a commentator? Like, what sort of age were you? Were you the archetypal standing in front of the mirror with your hairbrush instead of singing? You were actually sort of well cut commentating, or how does it work? How do you nailing it?
Yeah, I was a bit like one of those people. So shall I tell the embarrassing story? Why not? I used to do a thing at school at the playground, which was gerbil racing, which was basically me doing a horse racing commentary, where like the other kids would pick the name of this gerbil, and I'd like make up the race and what happened, really. So, I guess when I reflect on that, my life, my current life is pretty much sort of predestined, because I must admit, as a kid, kind of horse racing captured my imagination as well as football for whatever reason. Thankfully, I'm not in a world of debt. There we go. Yeah. So yeah. So no, somehow that did attract a crowd. Not many, but there are a few devotees. So I suppose from that kind of point. So there's that, and then I kind of I'm kind of pretty lucky, some privileged background. So I went to like university and ended up kind of doing student radio there, whether it's kind of coincidence from that or not, or whether then sort of working my way in from there. So I think as long as I can remember, it's like sport as always. Sport was like the first thing I can ever remember kind of grabbing me as a kid, I suppose, and it sort of works its way on from there.
Well, I mean, Tyler will happily tell you I'm absolute rent-a-gob, Andrew, when it comes to being able to speak. But at the same time, I found summarising actually a real challenge. And I'm not actually doing the main sort of commentary. I'm very acute with jumping in. There's certain verbal cues you can feel when a sentence is coming to an end. There's a natural point to pitch in, but I can talk until the cows come home. I mean, I'll typically the Tom Broadbent Lounge has been set up where we were saying, look, typically we'll do like 60 to 90 minutes, but I think poor old Tyler, I keep him up sort of way beyond that limit, and we end up. I mean, I think our record show transfer deadline day, we didn't stop talking, and we realised we'd done nearly 3.5 hours. So. But the thing that really impressed me about you, Andrew, and it's not. Please take this in the spirit it's intended. First time I met you in the flesh, you really struck me as being you're a really understated sort of. Actually, you came across as being you're not one of these guys where you stood there and I'm sort of like I start a conversation that I wish I wish I hadn't started. How am I going to get away from this one? You're very you're talkative, but yet you're economical with what you say. I mean, whereas I can literally, some people have to drag me away from conversations. Like, all right, I think you've had enough there, Hanrahan. Like, come away. So what? How does this work then when you get on the mic, Andrew? How much of that is natural versus how much do you have to actually produce like an alter ego to perform the way you do on a Saturday?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I'm normally kind of introverted. Really, I'm very happy to speak to people, but I'm not terribly likely at any given party to be starting off the conversation. If people come and engage with me, great. If people, if they expect me to make the first move, then that, for whatever reason, that just doesn't come naturally. So, and there are sort of a subspecies of people in radio like us, for whatever reason, we're kind of built in a completely opposite way to normal humanity, where you put a microphone in front of us, and for whatever reason, whether it's like, the fact you're sort of performing a role or you're a bit of an audience, that it's perhaps easier almost for us to kind of be ourselves and let it come out. So I guess you get a bit of a kind of me plus, but I don't think it's an act, if you see what I mean. Or I don't think it's something I kind of have to build up. It's just whatever reason, it's a kind of environment where I'm kind of expressing myself and letting go. And the rationale for that I can't explain, but that just appears to be how I'm built. So
well, it's look, listen, it's without getting too spiritual about it, I'm a big believer in like people having God-given gifts. I just think there are some things that just naturally we're hardwired to be able to do. And I think, as I say, I think it's massive credit to you that you're able to do that in such an eloquent, fluid, sort of natural way, and talk at length using such wonderful tone and description, without sort of essentially feeling like you're really either over egging the omelette or just loading things up with hyperbole. It just happens. And because I don't, you think about the terms verbal diarrhea, that's something that people will apply to me, but I wouldn't genuinely would not apply that to you, both at a professional and a personal, on a personal level. But so going back to your Swindon journey then, so you've been you're a Swindon fan ultimately through your parents, who are obviously Swindonian.
Yeah.
You now, if I've done my research correctly, you came into the Swindon sort of sphere in terms of the commentary and the football club sphere back in around 2013. So would that have been sort of just after Chris Wise's departure?
Yes, I think so. I know I don't know if he's listening or not, but I should also mention for my Swindon supporting a good friend of mine, Steve Casmar, because he was living in the same Surrey backwater that I was, and I saw him in the pub one evening in a Swindon shirt, and that helped to get me into a lot more games. So and we still text each other in despair about 30 years later or whatever it is. So Steve deserves a mention, and now I forgot. And now, as a terrible interviewee rather than interviewer, I've forgotten the second part of your question. So what was it?
No, not at all. So I was saying, so basically, so around that sort of era, just prior to you joining, I'd been involved with the likes of Chris and the likes of Ed Hadwin, doing a little bit, mainly around the London games, because I was a bit like with Cadiz when you go north. I was just a convenient person for them in and around the M25. But the thing that people probably don't know much about you, and which was actually lovingly fed into my direct messages by a few fans from the South Coast.
Bless them.
You have got quite a cult following down at Brighton and Hove Albion, have you not?
Of all teams, because my big kind of break, as it were, was getting promoted from doing a Woking to doing Brighton at the kind of radio station down there, which I absolutely was not remotely ready for at the time, but they still let me do it, and I still kind of got the experience. And I guess eventually I kind of won them over. So I did that for quite a long time, really. So that kind of got me. But yeah, I think on the kind of Swindon thing, I think Chris Wise had gone. I just stopped doing Bournemouth because I'd kind of gone on from Brighton to Bournemouth. Basically, Bournemouth had got into the Championship, and Radio Solent, who were there, were just kind of retweaking it. And I kind of did it on a fairly sort of casual basis for them, and they wanted to change things. They wanted to change things around. So I was out at Bournemouth. I didn't think it was because I was terrible. The kind of editor said some very nice stuff. It's just like staffing and all the rest. And then, as if by magic, Chris Wise disappears, and I think I don't know whether it's like Adam, who is the sort of sports editor for Radio Solent, which is the kind of radio station for Southampton, Bournemouth, and Portsmouth, the BBC one, put in a word, because I've never kind of hidden my Swindon tendencies. I always kind of figured it was just much easier to say this is my team, especially when there was no kind of big rivalry between Brighton and Swindon at the time. It's just like, get it out there, get it done. People know what you are, people know who you are, and they can kind of judge you appropriately. And we won't mention the most infamous Brighton Swindon games, because we'll never. some of us will never truly recover from those occasions whatsoever.
Well, listen, I was sent a lovely message from a chap called The Dicker, who said to tell you you still have you're really still very fondly regarded down on the south coast. That a lot of you obviously made a lot of friends in and around that football club at the time, and they said to pass you their kindest regards.
Oh, that's very sweet. No, it was kind of when they were on the up, but they sort of they just kind of got back into Sussex and Withdean, and Withdean was kind of as we all know, sort of kind of it should never have been a football league ground, really, in terms of what it could offer, but it got Brighton back into Brighton. It served its purpose, and they kind of started to build, and so you kind of cover a couple of promotions for them, and then you sort of get associated with it. And I was pretty ambitious. I was pretty kind of dedicated to to wanting to make sure the club, because whatever all our memories are of Brighton, you look where they are now, and they've, even when they were down in what's League Two now, you'd always get like a serious travelling support from Brighton, and I'm sure you remember that when we were playing them in kind of League One or whatever. So you kind of knew it was a big club, and you knew it was like a kind of say a serious club to cover. That implies that some aren't, but there was obviously if it could get going, there was a kind of potential there for it to sort of really progress. And I did some like season in the Championship there, and suddenly to go from having been at Macclesfield or whatever 2 seasons ago, and then you're knocking around at Ipswich and so on. So that was kind of ultimately a great experience to do.
Well, what I was delighted to learn about, I know you said you didn't want to talk about the game, but am I right in understanding you declined to commentate on that infamous semi-final second leg?
I declined to commentate on the first and second legs.
Good on you. Good on you, buddy.
Well, I'm sure the various Brightonians won't be too, but I don't think I regret that. I don't think I regret that at all, to be honest. Kind of putting my club loyalties first. That once I'd done like the normal league games. That was fine, and I didn't think anyone complained, but it was kind of everyone sort of knew where I stood and kind of took it with a good humour. I put on a suitably professional performance in the days when James Milner was briefly running riot for Swindon, but I thought playoff games would be too much. I think the way they probably ended would have done for me. Although I think having to go and interview Mark McGee after the second leg, I think if he'd had any kind of large available implement with which to remove me from the dressing room within about 2 minutes, he would have done.
Well, listen, I mean, I'm sure that is a story that not a lot of Swindon fans will be aware of. The fact that you actually, whilst that was your job, your club loyalties absolutely came to the fore, and you declined to commentate on arguably what was obviously clearly for them a huge game and a massive turning point in their club as well. Turning point in their history.
Yeah, I wasn't sure I could kind of quite do it justice. And I think the listeners' perception might have bit then in the playoffs. So it's like league games was one thing, but playoffs was another. So maybe I should have showed up and never said who I supported at all. But I'd done that years ago, so there was no kind of hiding. And like I said, there's no kind of history between the clubs. It's not like I was a closet Palace fan.
No, absolutely not. Well, listen, all it does is it just cements our affection for you even further. So I just wanted to make sure that our Swindon following are aware of that. And
pass on my regards to the Brightonians. Tell them I'm in no way jealous of my successor, who's touring around the best grounds in the country. No, I will say seriously, I genuinely, I promise you all, I would not swap. I definitely would not swap.
Oh, bless you. Well, that's what we like to hear. So do you, with Mike in hand then, for, with obviously... you're now at BBC Radio Wiltshire, BBC Radio Swindon. You've got the mic in your hand. Do you remember your first game commentating on Swindon? Do you remember how you felt? And was that a strange feeling for you, sort of commentating over the club you love?
Yeah, no, I did. I think I did like a couple of fill-in ones for before I was like I did. I think I did Stockport away time, and I think I did MK Dons away as well, just when for whatever reason no one else could do it. So those were kind of fun, but those were two sort of one-offs. So I never thought I was going to kind of do it regularly. I'm not sure I quite realised what I'd sort of taken on because obviously I said, as soon as Sean got in touch, I said, yes, of course I'd like to do Swindon regularly. Kind of do a thing we're on here. So the first one I did kind of as a sort of quite full-time, so to speak. I think it was like Shrewsbury away early, just after Mark Cooper had taken over. I did it with Tom Jones. It wasn't a very exciting game. I think Adam Reach scored, and Shrewsbury won fairly comfortably. And I was kind of out of practice because it was like the season just after I finished doing Bournemouth, so I hadn't kind of done any games to May. So I was a bit rusty. I was a bit too understated, I think, and I think the basic reaction was this guy's going to send us to the league. So I do remember that. I guess I'll wake up eventually, hopefully.
Well, I'm hoping that I don't know if you're paying any attention at all to our listener list, Andrew, but just to your right there, you've got the enigmatic Vic Morgan listening in.
Yes.
And I am sure. I mean, I'm hoping Vic is going to send a request to come on and speak, because I was going to ask him to do a bit of a comparison as to what does he remember his first sort of commentary adventure and try and juxtapose it with yours. But I appreciate he's got a fair bit on this evening, so he's promised me his ears, but he can't necessarily jump on and share his dulcet tones. But if we do get requested, that, Vic, is what I'm going to be asking you about. So do you going back to sort of, you've now got the mic in your hand, you've got a rough idea. Was it a natural thing for you to sort of manage bias? Because I know local radio, clearly you can be far more partisan than you can be when you're on national BBC radio. But equally, I understand that, probably because of, what TalkSport have really led the way with in terms of kind of putting your colours out there, sort of proudly proclaiming who you support. There has been a sort of shift in that culture. But back then, I remember that very much wasn't the case. Was that just a natural thing? Because you were on the local radio, you could essentially be that little bit more sort of enthusiastic, quite clearly partisan, or was that something you felt you had to police?
I think I kind of see the job without sort of getting too pretentious or whatever about it. Is I'm sort of there to look at things from a Swindon perspective, but I'm not meant to have kind of rose tinted glasses about how it is or what they're doing, or I think it makes kind of sense to be a little bit less dramatic about it when the opposition score, without totally downplaying the importance of the moment, because you have to kind of raise your voice and indicate it's a dramatic moment, otherwise whoever's listening to you and washing their car won't notice that the opposition has scored, which is kind of important. So I think my job is to sort of look at things through a Swindon lens without kind of being utterly sort of myopic about it, really. I suppose the one thing you have to perhaps check a bit is because you feel if I say part of the family, that's a bit but if because you feel it's sort of your team, I think it's probably there's a bit more danger of you kind of letting out that frustration and possibly being kind of overcritical because you're just fed up. They're losing 2-0 at Tranmere. They can't get, they can't string passes together and all that, and really kind of letting rip. So I think that's probably where I kind of try and moderate it a bit and look at sort of is the criticism I'm making or the kind of points we're trying to raise justified rather than by just getting this out of my system because I'm totally fed up.
I completely get that, and that ties in quite nicely with a question from Daz. Andrew, if you don't mind, filled off.
Yeah,
I'd ask this on his behalf. He was saying, obviously, as a Swindon supporter, like how do you do you ever feel the urge to want to stand and I'm kind of paraphrasing his question here, but actually. Lambast a player who is having an absolute shocker and putting that out on the mic. Like, appreciate you will understand there is an obvious professional boundary, but do you ever feel that temptation to just say, oh look, here he goes again, he's having an absolute mare, or how because clearly you've got this part of you that is a Swindon fan, you're just like us, you got the same sort of away from the mic, you got the same sort of drive, enthusiasms, insights as us. Do you ever feel that urge?
It doesn't happen too often, but I think it's probably useful that there's not a webcam on me because I'm sure occasionally you'd see like rolled eyes or a mouthed expression silently into the microphone that would not be castable just every now and then. But then, so that kind of gets out of your system. But I think there is some sort of weird part of me that clicks in, and then when I've kind of shut it all down at about 6 o'clock, I might turn around to whoever's next to me and go, "Jeez, what the so and so was that?" Really, see, you put a microphone in front of me and I'm not swearing, which normally I would have done at that point. So there you go. The training kicks in, I'm afraid.
Well, Mike's sent me a direct message as well and has asked what happens between games for you, Andrew. So from clearly. Swindon, we're once or twice a week if we're lucky in terms of the match day action. How do you go about filling? What fills your professional life in between your duties on the mic?
All right. Well, I should say this. This is not actually my kind of main job. So this is a kind of the loveliest side hustle, if you like, you can imagine. Really. So my main job's mainly kind of producing and editing video sports news, but because I work some very weird hours, so I work nights quite a lot. So in compensation for that, I get quite a few days off. So that's how I kind of put it all together. Really. So that obviously takes up a fair bit of my time. I do the odd kind of small freelance thing for Sky in their sort of radio bit because if you sort of hear the news on whatever your sort of I can't even remember if it's called GWR or not or whatever they call it. I presume it must be Heart these days or whatever. But so sort of at 9 or 10 o'clock one night, Sky will kind of supply a radio bulletin that goes to all the independent local stations, and they put that together, and there's a kind of sports bit of that. I sometimes do that, and occasionally I get to do a bit of tennis commentary, which is tremendous fun and completely different.
Yeah, because I understand that you absolutely love tennis, and that's like it's very, very close to your heart. Is that the over egg in the omelette, or have I got that wrong?
I would say tennis is very much my second sport. Yeah, no, tennis is a great thing, and from the professional point of view, commentating on that is just so totally different from I do football, be it sort of radio or TV stuff. But yeah, no. If I was going to list things, I'd probably put football, tennis, and I've acquired a weird interest in baseball as well. So those would probably be my top three.
Nothing wrong with baseball. Go Tigers. But I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole with you because we'll be here all night talking baseball. But so from a tennis point of view, is that taking you to Wimbledon and commentary on Wimbledon? It must. I mean, I would imagine so, given it's our big
I wish, sadly not. It's very much. It's generally been kind of the sort of smaller events, really, those kind of week to week events that kind of keep the tour going. And it's especially in COVID times, it's quite often sort of remote. So you'll be in a studio. You've very rarely been on site. Sadly, I've only been to Wimbledon as a paying spectator, which is the experience I can highly recommend. But that's kind of left on my ambition list to try and crack that. So very, very weirdly, this is a tangent that may interest no one but me, but I'm going to say, when I did student radio, Russell Fuller, who's the BBC radio tennis correspondent now, was kind of the year above us, and he was like the Holy Grail. We all looked up to, and he was like, oh my lord, if we can be half as good as him, we'll get a professional career. So it's kind of it's pretty gratifying to see how well he's done.
Well, I'll tell you one of my interesting baseball stories. So in my heyday, when I was working at 442 Towers, for anyone that's met me, they'll know that I'm follically challenged, and I
nothing wrong with
that. Yeah, there's no moss grows on a well-trodden path, Andrew, as I like to tell people. But and what was it? Someone said to me this week, you don't thatch an empty cottage. That makes me feel better about life.
I shall save that for future years.
Yeah, please keep that one in your armoury. But I was lucky enough to be invited along to go and see the Bronx Bombers. So I was watching the New York Yankees, and a friend of the editor of 442 back in the day, Hugh Slight, was the scoreboard operator, and I think it was his brother was the announcer.
All right, okay.
Yeah, so there we are, and he said, bottom of the ninth, and Hugh nodded and started laughing, and I said, what's going on bottom of the ninth? He said, oh, don't worry about it. So I didn't think much more of it. I'm blown away by this incredible spectacle that's going on around you at packed Yankee Stadium. Yanks were absolutely flying, the crowd were buzzing, and then there's this little lull at the bottom of the ninth, and it went something along the lines of, ladies and gentlemen, the New York Yankees would like to welcome our guest from the United Kingdom, Hugh Slight, editor of 442, and his good friend, Bald Hanners.
Oh, great.
There was this wonderful ripple of applause that went around the stadium. And Hugh's sitting there wetting himself laughing, but that story doesn't get enough of an airing. But
I'm very glad to give you an excuse to tell her. That's tremendous.
Yeah, well, I'm pleased you do. So there's my claim to fame when it comes to baseball. I was announced on the pitch as Bald Hanners, and it was my birthday last week, and there was a similar incident that went off whilst I was taken to the front of the town end by my kids, and I realised they were all filming. And I was like, what's going on here? And something similar happened. Let's just leave it there. But so thank you. Pitch side announcers and me have got a checkered history. But getting back to you, Andrew. Getting back to you. So tell the match day experience for you. I think what gets lost on a lot of people is clearly how much of your day, and I mentioned at the start about, you've got many a fable and many an adventure sort of tied into what it is that you do, and it involves a lot of technology, it involves a lot of liaising backwards and forwards to, where the studios are in Swindon, and obviously you're working remotely. That in itself brings its own pitfalls. You've got a myriad of things going on in your ear whilst you're trying to describe things that are going on in front of you, etc. But right the way down to even preparing for a commentary. What does your typical match day look like in Andrew Hawes land? What to sort of describe it? Let's just say I wouldn't say a run of the mill game, but one where it's not necessarily a Man City, but you still you've got to bring, not that you don't bring your A game, but there's a little bit of pressure on. What's your typical match day look like? Where would you start?
Well, I suppose if you kind of go back to the sort of prep bit, I will ideally have certainly kind of done that, or at least by the latest for a Saturday game, kind of by the Friday. I'd rather not leave it to the day itself and then be kind of scrambling around it. So,
and what does that look like, Andrew? Is that a typical kind of Clive Tilsley sort of chart? Do you follow a format, or?
Yeah, well, I've got kind of two things. One of which I think is fairly commonplace. So I'll make sure I've got I'll do a little kind of biography of each of the opposition and the. So probably like the 18 they've had in the last game, maybe one or two if they're like coming back from injury or whatever. So, if you've gone onto the Tranmere website where I haven't seen X is out injured, X is back. So you might add them. So there's not necessarily a lot in those. They'll mainly kind of be the sort of clubs where they're at. If they've won promotion, I might try and figure out if they've played alongside any of the Swindon players in their career. So or if they've got any like good weird stories about them. So God bless Wikipedia, everyone. So I'll try and do that. And the other thing I've got is, which people get totally bewildered by, and I'll sort of stick on Twitter for, is I kind of after each set of games I have a kind of grid I use, a bit like in the Rothmans football yearbook, for which I can date myself to back in the day. So I've got like all the Swindon players when they appeared, games they kind of scored in, because I can't remember all that stuff off the top of my head anymore because I'm too old. So so if we're on a good day, I've got all that. I've got my plastic folder with my sheets in. So I'm kind of hopefully prepared for whatever statistical quirks that people can throw at me. So on a good day, when you remember to get it right, it's like when Harry McCurdy scored 4, and partly because I cocked out once before, I could remember that the last player to score 4 goals was James Collins before that in Tyler's first game. There you go. So hopefully I've got all that ready, and then I get to places neurotically early, I would say. So even like for a home game and stuff like that, I quite often find myself kind of at the ground about 12:30, 1:45, just because
dodge that dodgy Hanrahan fella hanging around the burger van.
Well,
with his merry band of children.
There's a whole bunch of figures you run the gamut of. I mean that in a good way. I've been accosted by Phil many times. And I quite enjoy it in a strange way. So who else? I mean, this is kind of part of the charm of it, especially at home games. That if you're there early, you do see those same sort of characters around. So I'm going to go off at tangents. Like when I go to away games, sort of occasionally, I was doing Brighton or whatever. There's like Free Tuesday, I go to, Brighton will be playing on a Wednesday and a Swindon on a Tuesday. I might go and watch, especially for away games. You'd like see those same sort of figures, and this is terrible because I can never remember the names. Something always very comforting about seeing the two elderly ladies who are festooned in badges. I'm sure people know who I mean. I don't think I ever found out their names. I don't think they're with us, sadly. But so if you go to the home game early, they're like, it's kind of, there's something quite reassuring about seeing those people that you see every week or 10 days ago. But I do get there neurotically early, so I'll probably go into like the little sort of press room bit. It tends to be just sort of the legendary Marion there who looks after the press. So have a coffee, have a bit of a chat with her.
Right, now hold on a second. Talk to me about this bit, because you just mentioned that word coffee. Now, obviously, Andrew, we're all human beings, right? You're on the mic for quite a long time. You surely there are performance benefits from what you put into your body in terms of the ability to speak.
Not with my diet, generally, no.
Well, so I mean, me personally, I before we do these shows, even if it's a later start, I think most people that follow me on Twitter know that I get through quite a lot of coffee. But what do you do? I mean, are you really loading up before a game on the caffeine? Is that a prerequisite for you?
It does. I think it does kind of help, just because we're getting to very bizarre territory. But I'm terrible at like having breakfast. Breakfast is something I struggle with. So quite often I can get up and drive to an away game and not really have eaten anything. So there's kind of so I should actually kind of eat more and be more disciplined about it. So coffee kind of does sustain me. Energy drinks of various kinds can sustain me as well. But the obvious problem with having something fizzy just before you start speaking on a radio microphone, I'm sure that's not too difficult to put together, which I did learn at my cost for the Brighton game. So
well, but there's also a flip side to that conversation as well. Without getting too graphic, you're in a place where you're having to sort of it's not like you can just down tools and disappear for 5 minutes like I might if I've had that extra pint of Guinness before kick-off. So what do you, how do you, I mean, I guess on one hand I'm saying, look, are you loading up on coffee because, it kind of helps with your mental alertness and your verbal delivery, but it obviously has a detrimental effect in other areas as well, too.
No.
What I'm trying to politely say, Andrew, is, and I think the crowd just want me to ask you straight, have you ever been caught short?
I've been close. I've definitely been close. There have been those odd occasions, certainly, where I've not been happy to see 5 minutes of first half additional time put up. That's for sure. But luckily, your kind of brain has got to sort of spend 95% of its energy on working out who's got the ball and who they're crossing it to and all the rest. So you kind of survive. But I'm sure very occasionally I have been seen bolting from my position at half time, possibly climbing over one or two people to their shock when they're trying to do their half time report and get it. But it's not happened yet. But who knows if I'm still going at a certain age, then perhaps it's almost inevitable.
Well, you also mentioned getting to the ground neurotically early, which kind of answers the next point I was going to ask you about. Is there are obvious travel hazards. Now, for me, it's part and parcel of my supporting Swindon town. I live on the London-Kent border, and I have to essentially come round the M25. I have to go down the M3, then I have to cut across Bracknell, and then I have to pick up the M4.
I know it well.
Yeah, and I think my record, actually, I broke in pre-season against Peterborough, as people will testify. Again, anyone that sort of follows me with any kind of remote interest will remember me posting the fact that it took me 7 hours to get from home to... Yeah, which involved me missing half of a pre-season friendly, which my good friends of the Great Western Reds made a lot more palatable with various introductions after the game to certain Australian luminaries. Mr. Garner himself and half the playing staff. But yeah, I mean, but get sort of spinning that back to you, Andrew. That obviously has a very obvious professional impact as well. Now, does your neurotic travel habits prevent? Have you ever been sort of caught out in terms of trying to get to it, whether that be a something unpleasant on a motorway that's prevented you from getting there, or is there how would you go about sort of getting over that hurdle? Like literally, you cannot be there at the ground at the mic because of how things beyond your control. How do you do that?
Well, like I said, I probably kind of add an extra 2 hours onto whatever the official journey time is on the map, and you're pretty lucky because Saturday motorways aren't too bad. But I remember we came back to Brighton again. I did burst a tyre and arrive for a game against Shrewsbury at 7 minutes past 3, which wasn't the best, but it's kind of and the problem was the spare was stuffed as well in the car, which was never a great thing. So it was kind of go off, find a tyre, and it's just like you'll gradually frying because time is ticking on. Gay Meadow is waiting for no man. They're gonna be kicking off, but people were kind of fine about it because I think they generally know it sort of takes something pretty extreme for me not to be there on time. But that's the trouble. You never quite know. There could be a dreadful accident and just fate takes its course.
So, have you got a recollection of a day when you literally had your absolute worst case scenario? Have you ever had a day like that where everything that could have gone wrong went wrong?
Yeah. So, it was Milton Keynes away. Dave Hockaday was doing the co-commentary. I think it was fine. I think got there a bit later than usual, but for no reason. But it's one of those where a kind of anxiety dream you have comes to life, which I'm sure Vic will register, in that whatever I try to do with the kit, changing the kit, the sort of broadcast piece of kit we get, it just would not function. Basically, it has it's a kind of little sort of mixing desk in it, and you can broadcast when you have a red light on it and a green light on it. They both come on, and the red light would come on, green light would come on, all would look fine, and Stephen back at pace just could not hear us. And in the end, we could not get it to work. It literally has been the sort of anxiety dream I'd have, that I kind of wake up and I'd hear someone else doing a game on air that I was meant to do, or I'd kind of wake up, I was doing a commentary, I'd look down and those two lights would be out and I couldn't get them signed. And that was it. And in the end, we I think you were given the delights of BBC Three Counties, as they are. So sounding particularly pleased when Kieran Agard scored, which the rest of us weren't.
I remember the game very well, in fact. And funny enough, I remember being with the first time I commentated was summarised rather, was with Ed Hadwin at Griffin Park. And I remember Ed turning to me and saying, "This is the moment." And it literally is waiting for those lights to come on. And then I remember him looking at me and just smiling and going, "Don't worry, Hammerhand, you're going to get your big day today."
Yeah,
thank goodness. And then off and away we went. So Vic, you very kindly joined us at this stage. Hopefully you'll be able to jump on. Do you reflect on what Andrew's saying with any particular thoughts of your own?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Hi Andrew, nice to see you again. And
hello, Vic. Hope you're good.
Hi. Yeah, all right. Still real tightly.
Yeah.
And also to Tyler, because I met Tyler last night up there. So yeah, very much so. The story is all the same. You know, your main thing is to get to the ground as early as possible, connect, and that awful moment when it doesn't connect. I remember going to Ipswich once, and that was in the days when you didn't have ISDN lines. You had a music line, which was put in by a BT. Got there, tested the line out. It was great. Went and got a cup of tea. The line had been taken out by BT. And then we had to spend 25 minutes trying to sort the line out. So there's that awful moment when, it doesn't work and you're panicking. Simple as that, really.
Yeah, I think there's one other one where at Hartlepool, of all places, for Hartlepool v Brighton on a Tuesday night, I think I just ended up commentating down a phone. It sounded like it was like Hugh Johns of Mexico 1970. It gave it a very kind of strange and surreal sound, but we sort of got away with it. I think that one's.
Yeah, I think the one thing I would say to Andrew is last season. I mean, I did a couple of games last season, and it was a strange atmosphere. Nobody in the ground. I was there for the extra Swindon game in the EFL Trophy, if you remember, Andrew, and we didn't even get team sheets because people weren't allowed to come anywhere near you, were they? And it was just a bizarre experience because that year must have been one of the strangest of your life, I would think.
Yeah, goodness knows in so many ways the way it unfolded. I think it was very weird. You sort of slowly, because you're weirdly adaptable, I guess. I did sort of slowly adjust to the fact that there weren't people there. There weren't fans there. It does, apart from the thing, it does the commentary irreparable damage because the crowd sort of really help punctuate the whole match for you. So, if say your summariser is just finishing a point, you can hear the crowd going. It's like you already know that something interesting is going on before one of us has picked up. So you kind of lost that. You lost that sort of atmosphere. You lost the kind of whole emotion of it, and you just ended up sort of the whole emotion of it, apart from Brett Pittman, I think, being caught swearing at the Rochdale game after he got taken off. I think I should pick that up on our mic. But you just kind of got you ended up kind of getting kind of micro-absorbed, I suppose, in the game itself. And last season you couldn't really kind of work out quite what the idea was, which made that even more difficult.
Yeah. Is a question for both of you, good gentlemen. So we've been doing this show now for, I think we're on. I mean, Tyler, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're a month old now. But we're certainly. Technology is a wonderful part of our lives, and we all lean on it and enjoy it, and so on and so forth. And you don't realise just how much you do until it all suddenly goes wrong. And I mean, Tyler and I cooked up the idea of just putting this show out there pretty much on a whim. I hadn't planned, to start doing this, and I don't think certainly Tyler had. I'd had people nagging me for a number of years saying, "Oh, your voice, it sounds like you could do something on radio," and I always sort of poo-pooed it because I was involved in more the commercial side of media. But when we started rolling the show out, I'd been invited onto Alexi Leilas's very good space, actually, his Lonely Hearts Football Club, and it was just before the City game, and I couldn't, I was blown away by just how simple the tech was. I mean, Vic, you'll recall the first time I was so excited when we got you on the show for the first time. I think it was our transfer deadline show. But yeah, I mean, when the tech breaks down, it's absolutely sort of, infuriating. Whilst I'm not doing this to make money or build a reputation as such, you still kind of care that, hang on a second, I've got a good few hundred people here that are relying on us actually putting on a show and entertaining them for a few hours. And then literally all I've got is it cutting out, and there's issues between trying to get Tyler and I. Now, I've thankfully ironed a lot of those issues out. But I guess what I'm kind of leading to here is, Vic, you've obviously been involved with commentary over a very, very long period of time. With the changing technology that Andrew is dealing with now, and we talked about ISDN lines, and we talked previously about BT lines. Do you think that the problem still exists, that has tech become more reliable, I guess is what I'm trying to say, or do you still have squeaky bum time, do you feel?
Well, definitely. I remember one famous occasion at Dagenham. Thomas De Sevi scored. You might remember him, or was it Devesi? Yes. I can't remember, as Phil King used to call him. He scored in the first minute, and our ISDN line had gone down, and of course missed the goal. And I always remember on the Town End Forum, I got a dreadful slating, and I just kind of... it's not my fault. The line went down. I didn't, and it is that moment when you see there are the two lights, Andrew, aren't there? There's the green light and the red light. The red light comes on first, and then you want the green light to come on, because you mean that's the moment when the line is secure, and that's always a very good moment. But even then, sometimes ISDN has one of those moments where it goes, do you know what? This is a bit loud. I'm going to switch off. And the whole thing just cuts out. And you'll get that on Radio 5 occasionally. So it happens, on national radio too. And, when you're presenting a radio programme, not necessarily doing the football commentary, you get all sorts of technical issues crop up. And, in the business, they call it finger trouble if you press the wrong fader or you do this, that, or the other. And, technical problems are the bane of anybody's life, because if you have one, as you will know with this, Hannah's, if you have one, you're consciously thinking of it all the time and thinking, is the line going to stay up? And if the line doesn't stay up, you're then panicking, because you're thinking, well, everybody will go away. They won't bother then. But luckily they stay with you. And then I had an example on Saturday afternoon where I was doing Swindon versus Exeter for BBC Radio Devon, which was an interesting experience. And they had a commentary of the Exeter Chiefs against Wasps, and their line went down. So I had to introduce the fact that the line had gone down at Sandy Park and take over the commentary for the football and include the scores for the rugby as well at the same time. So it happens all the time, and it is, Andrew, one of those horrible moments, isn't it?
Yes, there's probably a whole small community of us that are kind of obsessed with red and green lights, as you can probably. I think actually the ISDN lines, which we kind of use the sort of digital lines. I feel like generally they hold up a bit better than they used to, but I've got a horrible feeling they may be faded out fairly soon as kind of internet technology takes all over, and then we may be at the mercy of trying to send everything back over the web, and the potential for chaos that causes. Because shouldn't tempt fate, but touch wood, the ISDNs are pretty good. But as Vic says, once they go down or once they play out, you simply can't do as good a commentary, because that's always in the back of your head. You're suddenly like looking. You may not be looking at the game. You're suddenly quite looking. Is the red light and the green light still on? Are they still on? Still on. Okay. What's happened now?
It's almost like watching the latest instalment of The Matrix. Are we going to go red pill, blue pill? Like, are we going to get this sort of bizarre? Like, you got people tuning in wanting Exeter rugby, and instead they're listening to Exeter City. So no, I can see all of that. Vic, I'm not gonna deliberately try and make you blush, but I'm really chuffed that you've come on at this juncture, because you and I had an exchange on text earlier today, and I was saying to you that when I first sort of essentially started developing my fascination for all things Swindon Town, one of the really important sort of tools in that, for anyone that's listening of a slightly older age, were these wonderful cassettes that have been produced, end of season cassettes and I had the both of the promotion seasons, so the Division 4 where we just completely destroyed everybody, and the Division 3 promotion through the playoffs cassette that were then very, very reluctantly yet kindly given to me by my good uncle Rex Hamley, who lives in Covingham, who I'm sure will enjoy hearing his name over the airways. But now, do you, Andrew, from your perspective, obviously Vic's been around forever, and I'm desperately trying to embarrass Vic, but Vic for me is very much like my original voice of Swindon Town. It's like when I think back to my earliest memories, I think of Vic's commentary of Charlie Henry's Rocket. I think of all. I mean, at one point, I listened to those tapes every single day on the way to and from school on my little Walkman. Do you, to what extent did Vic play a role in your your Swindon journey? Because I'm coming at that from a point of view of both a commentator and a fan. What level of inspiration did you pull from Vic's involvement with the club?
This is the kind of thing that again shows you how much technology has changed. Really, I didn't hear a great deal of Vic because I wasn't at Swindon very often, to be perfectly honest. So I might kind of catch you kind of switch on the car on the way back and hear sort of Vic's post-match interview and that. But terrible thing to say, I've not necessarily had a massive amount of Vic's commentary because we go back to the 90s. You can't pick up the web and listen to Radio Wiltshire at that point. You have to be in the area, and generally, unless I'm doing games, I'm not there. I do have to thank Vic, I think, for sneaking me in a car, if I remember right, with Jim Proudfoot, so I could get in to see Swindon beat QPR for the first Premier League victory, and that was well worth the long wait for them to do all the interviews afterwards and finish the trip back. That's for sure. So I certainly owe Vic for seeing Swindon's first ever Premier League win. So I feel bad that I can't say nice things about Vic's commentary because the bits I hear of it are very good. But
do you know what?
But literally, just because of like the geography and the technology. No, sorry, I'll say one thing. It's like it took me a long time to realise that Dave Mitchell spoke with a big Scottish accent because you just didn't hear it. You wouldn't hear the interviews very often.
It's very true, and I'll tell you what's very interesting. You talk about the tech, and we talk about Vic's sort of legacy and heritage in and around Swindon. The interesting thing for me as a long distance Swindon fan is exactly what you've touched on there, Andrew. I mean, whilst the COVID season, bizarrely, I saw more Swindon Town football home and away because of the benefits of being able to follow with iFollow. My sort of proximity to Swindon has been aided enormously by the internet. The ability to be able to stream games and radio commentary. The ability on a Tuesday night when I can't get to a game to buy a match pass and just sit down in my lounge with a beer and enjoy the game. I mean, but when I think back to being a kid, and I mentioned those tapes and listening to Vic's voice and so on and such like, if I used to literally kind of, because you would see the big match and match of the day and so forth on, and I would just pray. I used to sort of say to my parents, why don't they show like Football League matches on the telly? Like, because I was so desperate to see Swindon Town coverage. So I totally get where you're coming from, Andrew. Like I guess we're bemoaning tech and sort of talking out the pluses and minuses of it, but even in that COVID era, the ability for technology to have brought us so much closer to our, and so just stop with commentary, does it? I mean, the fact that I'd met Vic a long time ago. Vic, you tell me you're very kind in saying that you remember the day that I came up and said hello to you at Torquay when we were rolled over by Akin Fenwer and co back in the day.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, but I very more of your and my sort of more frequent content has come about because of obviously social media and the benefits that brings to the fore. And I think we're also blessed in that respect because we've got Ian, bless him, over in the US that manages to upload clips for us to all enjoy. We've got people that will post content as and when they can, live from the game, even down to my youngest who's decided to launch a bit of a spit and sawdust clips channel on Twitter. So it's an interesting time from a consumption of Swindon Town, isn't it? From a technology point of view, we're not as restricted as we used to be. I often sort of ponder whether or not it helped actually being starved of Swindon content because of location and the era in which I grew up, and whether that actually fed my passion for the club. Because I've got to say, as I'm sure you'll probably agree, gentlemen, it wasn't, whilst I was drowned with Swindon Town content and being able to watch games last season, it wasn't exactly great fare to watch, was it? And if anything, that's the kind of thing that would sort of probably push you away from the club.
Well, it's interesting. I remember you talked to Tom Broadbent the other day about that goal at that stadium, and I live in a village in Devon, and there was a madman at around about 5:20 running around that village in Devon shouting my head off. And they're very nice people around here, and they understand my passion, but they kind of were, what on earth's going around here, and it's I have a lot of friends who are Exeter City fans, and you of course, Andrew, were at university in Exeter, weren't you? And that's what led
yeah,
that's what led to that lift up to the county game. I remember it well. And that's the point. Technology has been fantastic for us, with the panel of which Andrew is a regular member, being able to do that and keep contact with people throughout the whole of lockdown and all that kind of thing, was tremendous and did me a lot of good, I have to tell you, because we were in a way detached from what we want to do, and that was going to watch Swindon Town play football, albeit watching it on iFollow and listening to Andrew last year wasn't, not for your commentary, obviously, but the whole thing was not the greatest experience in the world, was it? Except for that great, memorable Saturday afternoon in November, which we all remember so fondly.
Yeah, that was about it. No, it's very strange. I think for all that was like a dismal season with the manager who gave me some of the most intriguing interview moments that I'm ever going to have to deal with. I guess in a sense I'm still ridiculously lucky to have been there and kind of experienced it all and seen it kind of in the flesh. So I've seen Swindon score at the Kassam Stadium in the flesh, and there are very few Town fans who can say that. So I'm kind of lucky. I am lucky from that point of view, and perhaps I'm not sure I quite appreciated that at the time, because you're in that sort of weekly grind of thinking, where am I going next? What are they doing? What are they playing like? Why are they so bad? Why can't the manager tell me so bad? Well, they're so bad, and so on.
I mean, Vic, you must have really felt for Andrew at times last season, because I know as a supporter, I found those post-match scenarios that Andrew was finding himself in, utterly kind of, it was like nails down a blackboard. For a start, there was, from a fan's perspective, there was a perceived sort of feeling that, people were ducking coming out to be interviewed. There were times where appreciate the manager was going through, had a lot on his plate personally, but there were some inexcusable sort of performances, decisions, things that were happening on the pitch that were almost seen like, there was a lot of chat amongst the fan, like, this is being done just to wind us up now. Now, I mean, what was going through your mind, Vic, as an experienced sort of commentator, knowing what Andrew was going through on pitch side? Can you remember how you felt at the time?
Yeah, I can, because the point is, after a game, you don't know what a mood a manager's going to be in, because it's been a great win, and obviously they're in a buoyant mood and they're all happy and things are going well. But when there's a spell where things are going terribly wrong, then you have to go down and quiz these people. Maurice Malpass, he gets a lot of stick from Town fans, I know, but we got beaten at Histon in the FA Cup, and terrible afternoon. And I had to interview Maurice Malpass after the game and basically say, should you be in this job? That's not something that you really enjoy saying to another person. At the end of the day, they're human beings, aren't they? And, what you had to go through last year, Andrew, with that miserable season. I can't really think of another way of putting it. We suffered every day, every weekend and Tuesday watching it, let alone you had to go through it. And then go and talk to these people afterwards. Yeah, I did. I felt really for you, because you had a really difficult job to do.
Yeah, I'll sort of go, if I can, on kind of two different things. Luke Williams gets an incredible amount of stick, but I have to say, I think it was after the game where Swindon lost at Bristol Rovers. I think I was fairly close to doing what Vic said then, and kind of asking, should you kind of be in the job? And for someone who never really had any sort of designs on being the front man, I always felt he dealt with that with kind of immense kind of grace and dignity, really. And he was trying to do the best with his tools he had. I got on kind of very well with him, so I will kind of defend him as a person a bit, and we'll leave the football stuff. But I sort of spoke to him a little bit, and the kind of plans he had in terms of the experienced players he wanted to bring in and he couldn't bring in, had a different dynamic. But with John Sheridan, it was kind of different, not because he was actually kind of unpleasant. I mean, we had a couple of kind of questions where clearly he didn't appreciate the question, and that's fine. But it was just the point where the basic purpose, I guess, of the interview, or the first thing you want to do is find out from the manager what they thought of the game, and perhaps why it unfolded as they did, and if it didn't go well, why didn't it go well? What did you want it to do? So you're trying to find that now, and I could ask him in 3 different ways, and you get a different explanation each time. And I think that was the thing I found most difficult of all. It's just there wasn't any kind of thing you could grab on. I mean, even Ben Garner's coming under some stick at the moment, but at least you get some sort of coherent idea of what the concept is, regardless of whether it's working or not. That was the thing that I just couldn't kind of really sort of get to grips with and feel like the interview served sort of some kind of purpose, really. And sorry, you've got me off on one now. But again, going back to the kind of social media, by the end, my Twitter feed after a game, it was, I sort of kept messaging, so it was just like, go get him, go after him, and that was kind of how angry we were, and that's, I didn't complain about that, because it was sort of really important, especially with no fans in the ground, for telling me just how enraged people were with what they were seeing and what they were doing. But that was kind of a bit weird. It's like people kind of wanted me to go out and deliver his head on a platter, and that was a bit of a weird feeling as well, which I've not had before.
So, Andrew, try and put us, if you can, in your shoes when you're face to face with a manager post-match. I mean, that's got to be pretty intimidating. When, I mean, like you said, I mean, you're not saying that Sheridan was a total monster. You're not saying that.
No, absolutely not.
Guy in the world, but put us into how, that feeling of you're stood in front of a manager, let's say after another grim defeat, the manager is staring you down, almost kind of like challenging you, like, do you really want to go after me in this interview?
Yeah.
That's the sort of sense sometimes I get, that must kind of be the vibe when you're nose to nose, almost gladiatorial. But what goes through your mind? I mean, is there is there this feeling to, almost, I could really go for your throat here? And how do you avoid, because there are times when I heard you interviewing John Sheridan, for example, where I could tell there was a slight change in your tone, where he would say something almost flippant to you, and you could sense that you had been a little bit irked, and I sensed there were times where you really actually unloaded on him a little bit. Is that, how do you deal with sort of trying to avoid that, like a confrontation or an argument? How does the commentator do that?
I think the first thing is, and some of this you only get through experience of doing it a lot, is you have to try not to take it personally, in the way that, I would say most of the managers that I've dealt with in my time understand it's not necessarily that personal, even if you're asking them if you think they're up to the job or not, which can be more personal, but they kind of understand that sometimes that's what you've got to do. So most of them kind of get on a roll. So I think the first challenge is to think, if it goes a bit off the rails, if the manager's having a dig back at you, try and sort of divorce your kind of personal feelings out of it, and keep it on a kind of professional level, really. I suppose you do kind of, in those sort of few minutes you do kind of try and think about how you'll approach it. You probably, I don't know if Vic will back on this, you probably kind of know from a performance what the sort of killer question is, really, what everyone's really kind of built up for and waiting for you to ask. So I think it's something kind of you might sort of think about when you bring that in, because my usual sort of opening gambit is pretty kind of neutral, really. So it's like let them get what they want to say out of the game about the way, and then kind of take it from there. But it depends, yeah, especially after a bad performance, there's probably like one or two things you really know that people will want you to pinpoint on. So you're kind of thinking how you sort of work to those when you introduce those, and maybe kind of how you frame it, because it's not really in my nature to come out and kind of go at people, and you don't necessarily want to give them an excuse to kind of come back at you as well. What everyone really wants is for them just to kind of answer the question, whatever it is. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. I mean, I think it's an interesting one, because whilst obviously the organisation you work for isn't sort of tabloid in orientation, it's those kind of the sort of challenging. I mean, it's almost like if you compare, for example, the TalkSport approach to radio broadcasting with a 5 Live approach. The kind of it must be very tempting to throw an absolute incendiary question in there to get that explosion, because the sensational content typically comes off the back of it, but then with that goes your relationship. So,
yeah, no, I would say my aim ideally is, not everyone wants this. I think if you give me a choice between heat and light, I'd rather get light, if you see what I mean. I'd rather you came away from an interview with a better understanding of what the manager's done, what's gone on, and why he's there, than necessarily some kind of incendiary moment. I think the kind of Tommy Wright one after the Oxford one was interesting, because it was just kind of I hope there was sort of enough respect between us that we could kind of just have a disagreement about, or have a exchange about what went on and why, and perhaps why you could see it as not the best idea, and so on. And in the end, 6'5" and all the rest of it. So
they're not children, Andrew.
Yeah. So I mean that, but I'm not the kind of person to really kind of spar for that stuff. But it's just at the same time you have to kind of stand up for what the listener wants to be asked, really. And in the social media age, it's much easier for the listener to tell you what they want to be asked.
Yeah. Well. Listen, Andrew, I mean, I know that I speak for large swathes of the support base in saying that you do that, mate. You do a cracking job for us. Your delivery is effortless. You absolutely strike the right tone between partisan and professionalism. And I'm sure, as an experienced head as Vic is, he would sort of echo those sentiments. I mean, Vic, I was just going to bring you in almost like to kind of round things off for Andrew, really, because I've totally lost track of time and realised we're cracking on the typical Sir Tom Broadbent Lounge style. It's nearly 11 o'clock at night. But Vic, is there anything that you wanted to say to Andrew, or anything that you would ask Andrew by way of closing this wonderful segment?
No, I mean, I know how difficult the job is, because when you've driven up to Birkenhead for a game last night, I always remember going to Sunderland on a Monday night. You drive up to Sunderland, you get into the ground at the old Roker Park, you fix everything up, you do the game, then you get the interviews afterwards, and then you drive back again. It's not a case of turning up and doing a game for 90 minutes. It is a basically 20-hour day. And there's been many occasions when I've, really sort of felt wrecked at the end of it. And I know how difficult it is. So, and Andrew is such a great bloke. I mean, there's no, we often have a chat, don't we, when we meet up at some godforsaken ground up north or something.
Yeah.
I know what you have to do. And until you've done the job, I don't think you realise just how much effort and passion and hard work goes into it. And I'm not saying this as a poor me thing, because it's something we love doing, but
absolutely.
I did the game last week at the county ground with Exeter, and there's what they call the red mic moment. When the red mic goes on, that's the moment you live for. It's as simple as that. So, you know, Andrew does a fantastic job, and long may continue to do so.
Yeah, I completely agree. You know, both you gentlemen over prolonged periods of time have spoiled us with the quality of your delivery, gents, and I'm really grateful that you're willing to come on to this fledgling show and share such wonderful insights with us. And please, if there is, I won't hold you to it as a promise, but please don't be strangers, chaps. It's wonderful having you along, and I think. I mean, Vic, you nailed it when you messaged me earlier, and I thanked you for giving us a little mention on the official supporters club on Monday. What my attitude to putting Swindon Town content out there is one of it's not about, you know, oh, I don't want to talk about this show, don't want to talk about that show, or there's people in competition with this. It's all about this wonderful kind of ecosystem of Swindon Town content and putting as much of that out there as possible. Your voices are so important in that blend that it would be remiss of this show moving forward to not be able to dip in and out of your wonderful minds and get your input from time to time. So I won't hold you to it as a promise, but please don't be strangers is all I would say. I will. Tyler and I are going to wrap up this latest edition by having a conversation about Tranmere last night. You're more than welcome to hang around, gentlemen. You're more than welcome to turn your mics off. You're more than welcome to disappear. I appreciate I've taken up a huge chunk of your night, but poor old Tyler's been sat there sort of patiently listening to three elder statesmen of the Swindon Town sort of parish waffling on about everything from Glen Hoddle.
It was much better in the 90s, you know.
Yeah.
One thing I would say is when you said about Andrew's age and Tyler's age earlier, I sort of did a bit of mathematics, and I realised that even if you add those two ages together, I'm still older than that.
Yeah, but you're not getting older, Vic. You're getting better.
I'm still playing football, so I'm still having a go.
Yes, exactly that. You're only as old as your voice sounds, Vic, and you don't sound any older than me. So you likewise, you keep up the good work, buddy, and I appreciate everything you put out there on behalf of the football club supporters. So thank you, both of you. Tyler, I can't.
Thank you. Can I say one thing quickly?
Of course.
That's all right. No. I should thank Vic for the very kind words, which I'm flushing out here. And like I say, as much as I can, I'm very happy to, or I think it's great the kind of different Swindon content that's out there, whether it's the panel, whether it's, you know, Loath Strangers and all the stuff they've done. I personally don't sit there and, you know, think, you know, it should be entirely this is the domain of the BBC and no one else should be near it. The more different inputs, the merrier in the Swindon Town ecosystem.
Yeah, indeed, Andrew. Indeed, I salute that spirit and long may it continue. And the good thing is, I think across all the various endeavours that are being put out there by supporters and indeed official and indeed BBC channels, I think generally I think it try to be as open as we can and as all encompassing. And yeah, long may that continue. You can probably tell by the way I just keep wanting to just talk about commentary, gents, that I'm trying to put off the obvious and talk about last night, because much like Crawley, Tyler, we're in that place again, aren't we?
No, just no.
No, just no. Just how was it, Tyler? What was your so poor old Vic? Vic had a 10-hour round trip. Yours wasn't quite as dramatic in terms of.
I mean, we missed the train. I left my house at like 9 a.m, so
yeah,
probably worked out quite as long.
Yeah, and you obviously got to meet Vic up at the ground, so you know clearly we're tying that in quite nicely with Vic coming on tonight. But what was your takeaway? I mean, from the performance itself, Tyler. I mean, it raised clearly far more questions than we got answers. It's safe to say there's been a social media meltdown sort of post game. There's been more polls on Garner in or Garner out than I care to mention over the last sort of 12 hours. But what was your takeaway from the game? If we start by sort of looking at the lineup, what was your gut reaction as you sort of taking your seat, or rather standing by your seat before the game? Were you feeling positive looking at the lineup?
It was hysterical. I just thought the state of that team.
Yeah. I mean, you and I were exchanging messages. Obviously, you were up there. I was watching on the laptop, and I mean, I think the first thing that I picked up on was something that I mentioned after we saw Ellis Iandolo introduced against Exeter, was that it seems to me it's easy when we're not the ones that are being paid to pick the team and get a result. But I'm obviously, like a lot of people that be listening tonight, very fondly remember the Paolo Di Canio era, where we had a left footer, fast attacking left footer playing on the right hand side, cutting in and causing havoc. Now, I'm not for a minute suggesting Ellis Iandolo is quite at the pitch that Matt Ritchie hit when he was sort of at his peak with Swindon Town, but for me, we've got a two-footed left back on loan from Peterborough playing on the left hand side. We've lost Kane Kessler-Hayden on the right-hand side and all of his attacking endeavour. Surely it makes sense to be playing Ellis Iandolo either on the right or on the left and rotating the two, switching the two and keeping Tranmere guessing. So I think that was the first thing that hit me. Did anything similar occur to you?
Yeah, I just thought Ellis holding midfield was hysterical, but I don't agree with what you said about playing Rob Hunt there. You have a competent holding midfielder sat on that bench. And what's that going to do for his confidence, the fact that fullbacks just get picked in his position ahead of him?
Right, now listen, I'll clarify my Rob Hunt comment. So for the listeners that won't have a view on it, I tweeted out last night as soon as I saw the lineup that, similar to what I was just saying about Iandolo and Tomlinson, if you're going to put Rob Hunt in that lineup, the most logical place to put Rob Hunt is somewhere central, on the back of him being actually giving some really sterling performances at the heart of the defence. And would I play Rob Hunt as a holding midfielder? Absolutely no. I might consider playing Dion Conroy there. It's a role that he's played with us previously, but obviously he's injured at the moment and he's totally bereft of form. And he wasn't even in the lineup anyway. But my mindset was more one of, well, hang on a minute, we're playing second in the league. We've got a lad that's been very accomplished playing essentially as a centre-back, but really we all know he's a full-back. We're not playing full-back system, and he's not letting anyone down at the moment. So if you're going to be fair to people or give someone an opportunity, I think you've surely got to play Rob Hunt there as opposed to Ellis. If you gave me the choice, I would have put Rob East in there all day. Don't get me wrong. I personally, just as I was at the weekend, gobsmacked that Eastie wasn't used as a holding central defensive midfielder. I couldn't get my head around it. I couldn't understand it. But looking at the lineup as he's picked it, my gut reaction was, well, you've got to put Hunt in there. And obviously he hasn't done that. So, okay, so you've got the Ellis Iandolo sort of situation. I mean, he just doesn't look comfortable there, does he?
No, he's scared to use his right foot. And, I mean, in midfield, you don't have that choice at times if you are using your left or using your right. And then, like, other issues with it, it was just at the back, you lack a bit of leadership. And then the front line, that McCurdy's not there. He's not with it at the moment. So drop him. He needs to be dropped.
And you know what? I share that sentiment as well. I mean, it can't please Aston Villa that they've loaned us Louis Barry, and he's essentially getting a little bit of a kind of bit part introduction to life at Swindon. I'm of the same opinion. I think it's an interesting one with Harry McCurdy, because we talked about this on a previous show, Tyler, didn't we? About how Harry McCurdy's goals have kind of, in a way, generated a little bit of a problem in terms of the system that we're playing with two up top, because McCurdy emerged as almost like the small man playing off of a big man by scoring a few goals, and then went on a run, and that was great. And he and Simpson clicked, and we're away. The issue that we've kind of got now is that as his form's sort of dropping away and we're starting to see a little bit of ill discipline, he looks like a lad that needs to be given a breather, just an opportunity to step back. You know, it's no disrespect to him. Have a look at what's going on out on the pitch. Just have a think about your game. Think about how you're going to go on and influence it. Just pull him out the firing line. And you've got, sooner or later, Louis Barry's got to be given. He's got to be let off the leash. He's got to be given an opportunity. And Louis Barry quite clearly looks like a player that needs to be playing off of a traditional number 9 or playing in a front 3. So, yeah, I think most people would be sharing the same sort of, concerns about that starting lineup. Then, obviously, the whistle goes 5 minutes into the game, and we decide we're going to shoot ourselves in the foot again at the back. I think it's interesting, Tyler, because from my point of view, looking at the goal back, one of the things that struck me about last night was actually we were a little bit sort of, we were a bit sort of pondersome on the ball. We talking about. So if you're a centre half under pressure, one of your first outlets in our system has got to be the central defensive midfielder, isn't it? And one of the nice things about what Louis Reed brings to the table is that he receives the ball, turns, he's got very quick feet, and he distributes it very fast. I wondered last night whether that was what might have gone through Cooper's head when obviously disaster struck, because I mean, he just sort of held on to it. He just seemed reluctant to want to let it go. Now, whether that's because he didn't want to let it go to Ellis, or whether that's whatever was going through his head, maybe overconfidence, call it what you will. But what went through your mind when, apart from the obvious, what went through your mind when Cooper's had the ball nicked off his toe? Did you know straight away it was going to be curtains for the night, or how were you feeling?
Well, I knew he was going to score, because you give a striker that sort of chance, they shouldn't miss. But I thought, yes, it's Cooper's fault because he's lost the ball, but it's not all his fault. The lack of movement ahead of him is atrocious, especially when you watch it back. You've got Gladwin just sort of jogging backwards into players. Ellis runs away from him into a space that's being blocked off already, turns his back on play. You've got Rob Hunt, who's just in no man's land. Joe Tomlinson, you can't really see where he is, so I'm not going to sort of bring him into it. But that's 4 players who are just sort of out of nowhere. Odomayo and O'Brien are probably in the right sort of positions, but then as soon as Cooper loses the ball, Odomayo's jogging back. Fucking sprint, mate. At least make that effort. You probably won't get there, but make the effort at least.
Now, effort's an interesting word when we're reviewing sort of yesterday's game, because I was obviously going out of my mind, sat there watching it, as my son will relay to you next time you see him. I was just burying my head into the sofa, just could not believe what I was watching. It was reminiscent of some of the dross that we had to put up with last season. There's obviously been whispers of a bit of discontent, a little bit of trouble in paradise in terms of there's been debate around whether Conroy's injured. There's been whispers around fallings out with various players in the squad. We've obviously lost Anthony Grant, and there was a lot of speculation over what was going on with Granty's situation at the club and the circumstances in which he lost his place and then couldn't get it back. And then there's been an interesting Instagram post, I believe, today from Matthew Bowdry, which, let's just say, is open to interpretation. Now, with all of that, a loss of form, a lot of injuries, a lot of new faces, there just seemed to be, that lack of urgency and effort that we were seeing before Christmas. There seemed to be a reluctance for players to show, to want to get on the ball. To want to make things happen. And I think the one thing that we, I think it was before the Sutton game, where there have been some question marks about how slow our build-up play was. So that nobody was knocking Ghana ball, but everybody was saying, if we're going to play Ghana ball, it's got to be played quick tempo, like really fast, really effective. And then we saw a version of that against Sutton, certainly for long periods of that game. Last night, I'm not quite sure. I saw players holding on to the ball a lot longer than usual. I saw players trying to carry the ball a lot, further than they normally would. And quite frankly, there didn't seem to be the commitment to the system that we've been seeing in previous weeks. Is that how you read it, or was that just me with a negative mindset?
I just thought it was awful. I just thought it was absolutely dreadful. Like you say, Sutton, because I watched that one and I followed. The tempo was there. We were having shots. We probably should have had an extra couple of goals that day. Then Northampton, admittedly, they'd just come back from COVID, which probably helped making us look a bit better. But we were high pressing, quick tempo, and we've slapped 5 past them. And then it's just back to this slow, sluggish, lethargic way of playing that it's not working. It's too slow. It's so easy to predict. As soon as you see Jojo on the ball, you think, right, it's going to a centre-back. One of the centre-backs gets it. Oh, it's going to the other centre-back. and you can just see what's going to happen before it even happens. And I think it was Andrew who actually tweeted about it, saying that it's really annoying going to a game knowing what's going to happen beforehand or something along those lines. And it's bang on. Like I sort of went there knowing like we're going to get absolutely smashed there.
Yeah, and that must have been so disheartening. I mean, it was disheartening enough for me, mate, just opening up the wallet and buying myself a match pass. But I felt after the weekend, it was, there's been no reluctance for me to splash the cash on Swindon Town this season. Despite the fact I'm freshly retired and cutting my cloth, I have probably been spending more money on our football club this year than I ever have. And yet last night, it was reminiscent to some of the debates I had in my own mind last season about whether or not I was going to bother. And I did, because I was like, no. I've seen enough earlier in the season. It's not all doom and gloom. We got some talented technicians out on that pitch. I looked at the lineup. I thought, well, maybe. And then lo and behold, 5 minutes into the game, it was literally last season revisited. I was like, why have I made that decision? Credit to you. You've obviously you've done planes, trains, and automobiles to get yourself to Birkenhead. So that the pain must have been 100-fold what I was feeling.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a photo of me with my head on my knees, feet up on the chair in front, just looking miserable.
Yeah, utterly glum. Well, I mean, look, there's no point picking the goals apart. The whole thing was a debacle. A really sloppy second goal, really sloppy penalty. It all felt so inevitable. I think the thing that actually as an incident, we touched on it earlier. The thing that just before you came on, Silo, we talked again about ill discipline, and it seemed to come from the most sort of surprising source in this case, in Scott Marshall getting a red card, rightly or wrongly. He was deemed to have encroached that. Well, he certainly did encroach the opposition's technical area and was given a red card accordingly, harshly in the view of Ben Garner. But appreciate all of our players are going to want to stick up for one of their own and show a little bit of fight when things are kicking off. But I don't know what your feeling is about this, Tyler, but for me, discipline comes from the top, right? So if you've got a manager that is, I'm going to talk about this on a few fronts, actually. You've got a manager that's constantly digging out referees. We know the referees are poor standard. Now, in my mind, one of the greatest managers in the history of British football was Brian Clough. And I don't know whether you're aware of what Clough's approach to referees was, Tyler, but Clough was actually pretty smart. He would come down really, really hard on his players dissenting against referees. And he would actually go the whole hog to make referees feel very welcome, looked after at games. Their facilities would always be good. He would be the first person to dig out one of his players if they got into the face of a referee. And I think a little part of that was he tried to portray an image of sort of being a little bit old-fashioned, a bit traditional when it comes to authority. But actually, it's just really smart. Because these referees, at the end of the day, yeah, they've got a job to do. They're blowing the whistle. They've got to uphold the laws of the game. But they're human beings. And also, referees talk. So referees get together and talk. They go to conferences. They go to training, coaching workshops and so forth, all together. Now, if you've got a team that has got a reputation for having a striker that waves his arms about a lot and is constantly in the ear of linesmen and constantly in the ear of referees, surely they're going to be telling each other, oh, keep an eye out for that Harry McCurdy lad. He's going to be in your ear. Oh, he's it's just human nature, surely. Equally, their staff will try and put you on the back foot. You're in for a rough ride. They're going to question your decisions. They're going to make you feel, you don't know what you're doing. Or now, whether that's what's happening or what's not, the fact is we're getting into the era of referees and questioning decisions over and over and over and over again. And surely the level of poor performance we're seeing from referees this season, surely that's got to be having an effect. It's the only conclusion I can draw, apart from the fact they're just god awful. But I hate to use the term "let's polish a turd," but surely that should be our approach this season. It should be, well, if we're going to try and curry favour, I'm not saying we do anything underhand, but if you want any kind of, in life, I believe you get more with sugar than you do with lemons, right? So why are we dishing up lemons constantly to referees? I just don't get it. So to see, I guess the point I'm making is to see Scott Marshall get sent off yesterday was just another demonstration of our sort of, of our sort of, inability to sort of manage ourselves. And I mean, if I'm running our club, I mean, this can't be the kind of thing that's pleasing Clem, because he's going to be the one that's having to write the checks. That we're having to pay bills every time people get sent off. We get fined, and it just seems like, so it's a waste of money, and it's tarnishing our reputation. And fundamentally, I believe that it's drip feeding down into the team, and it's going to be affecting how the team act towards referees. I mean, you're a big fan of Louis Reed. I mean, would you have honestly believed that Louis Reed would have been the kind of lad to come sprinting off the bench and confront a referee in the manner that he did, Tyler, a couple of weeks ago?
No, but I'll give Reedy a bit of slack, because if there was any referee that deserved it this season, it was that Crawley game. I was saying it the other day. Most games this season, admittedly, the referees have been poor, but I've never actually been annoyed and thought the ref's the one that's cost us the game. We sort of cost ourselves it most of the time. But Crawley actually felt like, you know what, we've really been screwed out of it here. Yeah. And so I sort of side with Reedy on that. And to be fair to him, he's come out, he's apologised for it, and he's gone about it the right way. Whereas, I mean, I hate to throw him under the bus again, but our captain went and did the exact same thing after Barrow, and we never even got an apology. So it's just the little things like that when it comes to your discipline. And then, like you say, it comes from the top. And it's just been so poor this season. So poor.
I mean, if I'm Louis Reed, right, for example, and as you know, huge fan of Louis Reed, and I pretty much share your mindset in terms of, I shared that frustration. You see, I'll just make the point again. You see your manager almost like on a weekly basis questioning referees and referees' decisions. You're watching your skipper get sent off after a match, shouting his chops off against the referee, and who are you taking your lead from? As a young professional that wants to be kind of one of the leaders of the team, that Louis is clearly emerging as one of our most influential players. You're going to want to. I mean, it's just human nature, isn't it? You're going to want to feel that need for accountability. You're going to want to lead the fight to the people that are serving up the injustice and asking them to explain themselves, rightly or wrongly. It just feels like a human instinct of a slightly less experienced professional, albeit a technically gifted one on the pitch. But I mean, obviously, we got Louis Reed back for Scunthorpe at the weekend. He's been a huge miss, hasn't he?
Yeah, massive miss. He has to go straight back in that team. If Jacko's available, you've got to get Payne back in. I'd probably start Aguiar. I think I'd probably start Mitchell Lawson or Louis Barry. A lot needs to change because it's just not been good enough. And I'm not saying I'm Garner out or Garner in, but it's starting to get toward like crunch time now. Like I'd say another 3 games like this, and you're really putting it on the ropes.
Well, some of the, I mean, again, you've raised an interesting sort of topic for conversation, Ricky Aguiar. So we've not had a huge amount of sort of game time to judge Aguiar and whether or not he's ready to be playing first team football. But I mean, I don't believe I'll be the only one that was watching the game last night that like genuinely sort of balked in when I see Jodie Mitchell-Lawson being brought in to play a central midfield role when Johnny Williams goes off injured, when you've got a natural sort of orientated, for want of a better word, central attacking midfielder in Ricky Aguiar on the bench. It's like the Ryan East situation with the central defensive midfielder position. I mean, if we've already got it, what better learning experience have you got for a young professional? Now, you'll talk about, a young professional will be crushed by pressure and blah, 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 blah. Well, if that's the case, he shouldn't be anywhere near the first team. He certainly shouldn't even be on the bench. Appreciate we're threadbare. But he's been deemed as good enough to not be loaned out again. We bought him back from Chippenham for a reason. He's a ready-made replacement for Johnny Williams. Surely you've got to bring him on. You've got to use him. But for me, it was grossly unfair on Jaden Mitchell-Lawson to be asking him to play central midfield, a position that I'll be very surprised if he's had any kind of prep going into that particular role. At at a time where Mitchell Lawson's, ultimately he's straining at the leash. He wants to be sort of deployed up front. It's square pegs in round holes. And it looked like that as well. I mean, I would have hoped that, it was obvious that Mitchell Lawson wasn't comfortable playing in that central midfield role. It seemed to take a long time for Garner to recognise that before he introduced Aguiar into the fray. What was how, again, I only had the TV perspective, Tyler, watching it from my end. You were in the stands. I mean, did he look a square peg in a round hole from the stands, Jadon Mitchell-Lawson?
No, the square peg in a round hole don't describe what he looked like. He was someone who looked like he'd never played midfield before in his life, which he probably hasn't. He just didn't really understand where he should be at what time, and the positioning was all off. You can tell he wants to just be in that forward line.
Mm. Yeah, it was deeply frustrating. But well, anyway, let's not worry too much. We've only got Scunthorpe to look forward to on Saturday. Just so happened to win last night, and just so happened to have a certain Mr. Anthony Grant in central midfield, who's no doubt going to want to play with a point to prove. To what extent do you think we should be fearing Scunthorpe, Tyler? Because prior to last night, I've got to be honest, I was licking my lips at the prospect of playing them at the county ground on Saturday. Now, I genuinely believe Saturday is going to be a really, really, really important moment for Ben Garner's tenure as manager of Swindon Town, and also the general demeanour and feeling amongst the supporter base. I mean, so there can be no doubt that the club have been brilliantly supported by the club this year. We turned out in our droves. I'm really concerned that, obviously the pressure's on. We've got to put on a big performance on Saturday, because I've just got this awful feeling that if things don't go our way on Saturday, the naysayers, just to stress, I am not Garner out as things stand, but my patience is just really starting to wear thin for all the reasons we've discussed. Are you of the same mindset as me, Tyler? It's not quite kind of make or break, but I mean, Exeter was big at the weekend, but now Scunthorpe is huge for the management team.
Yeah, I mean, if Scunthorpe, so what is it now? We've got Scunthorpe, Carlisle, and it's another sort of team around that area, I think. We've got those three coming up, and it's got to be 9. And if it's something like 4 points out of the next 3, he's got to go. It's that simple. Anything below 7 is failure, near enough, from the next 3.
Well, a point was made to me earlier. I mean, I don't want to be writing Ben Garner's obituary, and I do stress, I'm a big believer I was a big believer at the start of the season about consolidation, rebuilding. I'm very, very, very well aware of the fact that we as a club have had so much turmoil that actually we do need a period of rebuild. I do appreciate the fact that there are things going on in relation to, obviously, the playing staff. They're changing attitudes in terms of developing young players, and these things are going to take time. I'm plugged into all of that. I think the thing that dictates my thinking is clearly appreciate. Listen, the club didn't choose for me to have a 240-mile round trip every Saturday. That's my labour of love, but I spend an awful lot of money to travel from where I live and bring my entire family up to the county grounds to ultimately be entertained, to enjoy football, and to feel that we are. I'm seeing a group of lads out on that pitch that are absolutely busting their ass to get us those 3 points. And I've lost count the number of times this season where I've come away from the county ground just feeling flat and underwhelmed. What's kept me going is that I've been able to go to away games where I've seen it click, where at a point in time we weren't leaking lots of goals. We were looking like pretty spectacular going forward. Some of the football I saw was as good as anything we saw under the Richie Wellens era. But like I've said, I think someone was talking earlier about Paolo Di Canio, and I made the point that, listen, at the end of the day, football's a results business. It's an entertainment business. And if you're not putting ticks in those boxes, it's inevitable that your employers are going to start asking questions about, well, hang on a minute, is there a better option? I don't know. clearly I know that you have a certain mindset on certain managers that are available out there at the moment, but there are managers that, this is the other thing that will not be helping him, in that there are very affordable managers that have credibility in and around SM1. It must be very, very tempting, to look at some of that. But I think, to what extent, we've got to kind of manage this quick fix. Like, do we, for example, let's throw his name in there, Richie Wellens. To what extent would Richie Wellens coming in be I know you don't think he'll be a quick fix, but just take him as an example. Would that satisfy the fan base in the short term, but then would that be damaging longer term when they're building a project behind the scenes with Ben Garner at the helm of the coaching? To what extent do we just need a good slap in the face by the hand of, sort of sensible thinking and common sense? Like, hang on a second, this guy needs time. I guess what I'm trying to say, Tyler, is like, twist or stick. You're saying, obviously, if we only get a couple of points out of the next available 9, then you're going to twist and you're going to go with someone. But who are you going to bring in?
Christ, who would I bring in? There are good names available that you could potentially draw down. I mean, one of the ones that someone I was speaking to the other day about it mentioned was Lee Johnson. I'm not sold on it, but I could see why you'd want it. Obviously, recently being sacked at Sunderland, but what he did with Bristol City, as much as I'm not keen on Bristol City, was impressive. So it's one name, and obviously he's quite local, so it's not like someone who'd run off to go up north for another club like Richie did. But beside the point.
Yeah. I'll just pin my colours to the mast. I think I think with the players that we've got available to us, the style of football that we play, I could see Richie stepping in to run the current sort of setup at Swindon Town, implement a style of play, and crucially, the big difference between probably the two gaffers will be a certain style of fan engagement. I think he would very quickly address the situation around him leaving, and I think he would very quickly plaster over that. And I think he would be given a far more leeway in order to achieve, even if results didn't go his way straight off the bat. I think it would be too soon to look at a Matt Taylor. I think Ryan Mason is going to be way outside of our budget constraints, and then really beyond that, you're starting to look at, are there big names out there that just like the idea of potentially coming in and getting hold of a project. And a bit like Glenn Hoddle back in '93, Hoddle didn't come in earning the money he was on at Tottenham as manager of Swindon, but he did it because it was part of his development, part of his stepping stone. So, but obviously, times have changed, and football's not what it was back in the early to mid '90s. But so I think it is a tricky thing. But so, like you said, Johnson, there are options out there, and I think whilst I'm not saying we need to press the button now, and like I said, I maintain I am still very much pro Garner. I think there are a lot of things that have happened to us in this window that are just beyond his control, and probably beyond Ben Chorley's control as well, in the losing of all of those loan players in the circumstances of which we've lost them. Obviously, they are working to a certain budget, and I think strikers come at a premium, and probably the strikers that are available or could have been available are outside of our budgetary constraints. But the one thing that Ben Garner does have the power over is, the tactical setup, and we have got players in that squad. The tactics have got to change, as far as I can see, particularly with injuries to Johnny Williams, with injuries to Jordan Lydon. Gladders looks like he needs a bloody good rest. I think he's got to try and shuffle his pack, and he's got to be a little less risk averse. Whether that means, appreciate he's recruited for 5 at the back, but unfortunately, someone's going to have to potentially take a hit at the back or we're going to have to drop the idea of a central defensive midfielder and play really further up the pitch. But So clear, I guess the message I said ahead of Saturday, he's going to be a very brave man to persevere with the same setup that he went into the Tranmere game with, isn't he?
Yeah, for me, I mean, I'm not a qualified coach, so obviously it's not got the same weight, but I'd probably say it's time to go for like a 4-3-3, and you have to sacrifice one of your centre halves, but get Davinson up there through the middle with Mitchell Lawson on one side, Barry or McCurdy on the other, and then obviously you want probably Tomlinson, Ellis or Hunty, and then it's your midfield three, which at the moment without having a Leiden would be a bit painful, but just give Aguiar that chance. If you don't think we're going to go out this year, play someone who'll be a key figure next year so they have the minutes.
Yeah. Tyler, Gary's requested to come on and have a quick chat with us. Gary, if you're able to activate your mic, mate, you're more than welcome to come on and have a natter with us just prior to us wrapping up. So unless you've dashed out to the kitchen to make yourself a cup of tea, it'd be lovely to hear what you've got to say, mate, as a lifelong Swindon Town fan, which is clear from your bio. So we'll give you a couple of seconds, mate, if you can get your technology working. Tyler, whilst I've given Gary the opportunity to come on, whilst we see whether or not he can sort those bits and bobs out his end. Anything you want to say as a wrap up, really, bud? I mean, pretty talked out, mammoth show, have a 2 hours and 20 minutes to Swindon Town. Anything you want to say about Andrew's input or Vic's input? Anything you want to say that hasn't been said ahead of Saturday, mate? Now's the time.
Well, might as well touch on last night. It was the one good thing I can take from last night was Tranmere scoring in the 5th minute, which was really, really nice to see, even though it's against us, if that makes sense. It felt like
very,
with all the circumstances. So
that with young Nate,
quite nice in a cloud of shit.
Yeah, for anyone that isn't aware, obviously Tranmere lost a young supporter who the club had very much taken into their hearts. A young lad, I think he was 5 years of age, and sadly lost his battle against serious illness not too far ahead of the game. And Tyler, what was lovely was that there's been some really lovely messages from his family to Swindon supporters, just full of. I mean, it didn't go unnoticed that when the ball hit the back of the net, we could have just basically just buried our hands in our pockets and gone on a big sulk. But it was at that point the Swindon fans were applauding along with the Tranmere fans observing that minute's applause, and that continued, and that clearly meant a huge amount to the family. So, at a time where football fans are taking a battering, including our own after the events at the Man City game, it was lovely to see a little bit of class from the best part of 300 odd fans that went north in their Swindon colours. So congrats and well done to all of those guys for putting our best foot forward as a club. Right, Tyler, well, I'll be seeing you bright and early then on Saturday. For anyone that wants to come over and say hello, guys, we're usually either we're usually at the Cricket Club or usually in the Legends Lounge. We're pretty obvious to spot. Just look for the bald fat dude in dodgy merch, and that'll be me. And Tyler will probably be cringing away from me somewhere, trying not to be seen to be an associate of mine. But really appreciate your ears, everybody. I hope you've all enjoyed tonight. I thought Andrew was absolutely sparkling. Really enjoyed Vic coming on as well. And Tyler, your insight and input is as valued as always, mate. So thank you ever so much. Look forward to seeing you all on Saturday. Until then, guys, take care, and thanks again for your ears.